I was a junior in high school and couldn't read that well, a fourth grade reading level, because I would cheat on everything. And I learned how to read, I learned how to write. I taught myself all these things, all these disciplines. But whenever the first real big challenge would come, that little windstorm would push me back in the hole. And I realized, man, I'm fixing stuff on a surface level. I'm all surface, man. I'm not going deep into the cellar of my mind and fixing the foundation of my soul. My soul is broken. But I knew I could fix it, but I was afraid to go back. I was afraid to face the demons of my life, because you start lying. You want anybody knowing this shit about you. So you start lying about who you're not and start creating a person about who you want to be, but it's not who you are. So that's when I started realizing, man, I'm never going to get over the hurdle. I'm always going to live on a surface level until I go deep, deep into the sewer of my mind to figure out and face all of these different demons. That's hard. It's hard. We all like social media. We all like everybody to see us for who we want to be. That's why we post beautiful things about us. That's not going to fix you. So I realized that, and that's when I started going back. So I was about 24 years old, and I went from 175 to almost 300 pounds. And that's when I sat down on my couch and realized we got to go back. And it started with me going back to my father. So we left when I was 8 years old. We went to a small town in Brazil, Indiana. There's about 5 to 10 black families in a town of 8,000 to 10,000 people. And there was a big hub of Klansmen that lived in Center Point, Indiana. And I talk about that in the book. So the Klan marched in the 4th of July parade in 1995 in Indiana. So when you come from a messed up foundation like I did in Buffalo, New York, where my dad beat me senseless, and now I have that messed up foundation, and now I'm here being the only black person. I call it the only in my book, being the only black person. My mom's working 3 jobs. We're living in a $7 a month place. She's never at home. So it's not like I had some mentors coming in to help me. They were trying to put me in these different group places for like having some shrink talk to me and these 8, 9 kids, and one kid setting his house on fire, another kid's peeing in the trash can, another kid had a helmet on, banging his head up against the wall. And I'm looking at this at 8 years old. And I'm gonna get back to your question that you asked me, but these are the things I had to go back and relive. I'm 24 years old now, and I have to go back to all these things that no one knew about me in this group place where I'm in this place where these people are crazy and they think I'm crazy. And I'm looking at them thinking, I'm not crazy. You just don't know where I come from. I came from a place that truly damaged my mind, damaged my soul, and now I have to go back on my own to face this shit. So, at 24 years old, I sat there a lot of times. It was like one day I woke up and said, I gotta face this. This haunting fucking voice in my head kept on saying, man, we gotta go back. The only way we can go forward is to go all the way back. And that's very scary to do for everybody. Yeah. But the only way you're gonna fix yourself is to go all the way back to the beginning, to your childhood, because that's where everything starts.
And that's what's blocking most of us.
All of us.
Yeah.
All of us. Everybody thinks it's, my God, like my marriage is messed up. This is messed up. You have to go back to fix all your problems. It all starts from the root, man.
The root, yeah.
The root.
I was just about to say, we have to go back to the root, because otherwise we're just dealing with the symptoms.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you cannot fix anything by giving it Motrin. You have a jacked up knee, the swelling may go down, but it's still jacked up in there. You got to get it fixed. You got to fix the knee. All those pills do, so pretty much, is just let the swelling go down. And you can live a little longer, but you're not fixing the problem. You're not fixing the problem.
And I guess the most people don't go back, or all of us, like you said, we don't go back because we don't know how.
Right.
Right? Like most people don't know how. Like, how do you start? How do you go back? And and I love that example that we start thinking the issue is our marriage or our relationship right now or our job or our career. And I totally agree with you that we need to go back, but we don't know how.
Right.
Now you start talking about in the book some ways in which we can start. How?
Right.
Can you tell us about some of those?
So one big thing is the accountability mirror. You have to start with yourself. So what happened in my life was we started to get, I call it like the rucksack. A rucksack is a pack that you carry in the military and you put all your stuff in it. Your radios, your food, your water, all that stuff you have to carry in the military. That's your rucksack. It's a backpack pretty much. as you're growing up, we all have a backpack. Most of ours, hopefully, is empty, and what we put in it is all the crap we go through in life. That's what is in the backpack for the civilians, and we carry it around with us. So what you have to start doing is realizing that no matter where you're at in life, I got called nigger a lot. My dad abused me, learning disabilities, stutters, immaturity, insecurities, self-doubt, so much crap on top of me. So much stuff. I lied a lot to create friends. So much stuff was in my backpack. No one's coming back to help me. So it starts with that person in that mirror. You have to realize you are on your own now. And whatever else you believe in, I don't care what you believe in, but on earth, it's a very lonely journey. And it starts with the accountability mirror of looking at saying, hey, my dad who beat the hell out of me is not coming back. All these things are coming back. I have to face myself. And you have to own all those things that people may have done to you. Now it's yours. You got to own it. And it's yours now to fix the problems that people did to you. It makes no sense. It's not fair. I get it. But if you live in that woe is me mentality of guess what? My dad did this to me. My mom did this to me. People who bullied did this to me. You're going to always live right there. You have to figure out ways to move forward because you're not coming back. And it starts with the mirror. I call it the accountability mirror in the book.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm glad you brought it up. Anyone who's watching, listening to this right now, I really want you to take this seriously because this is like what you're talking about, what David's talking about here is exactly why all of our suffering and pain that we're currently experiencing feels so tough and hard, because unknowingly or knowingly, we are choosing to be stuck here.
Right? Exactly.
Unknowingly or knowingly, whatever situation you're in, you're choosing to stay stuck because we don't want to go and unpeel and uncover.
That's right. You don't want to break open that callus, that scar in your mind. You don't want to break, you have to break it open, let that blood flow. You have to let blood flow in your brain. You have to let all that stuff flow out. All that toxic stuff that you have trapped in there has to start flowing out now. So, like you said, you are doing this to yourself. Yes, people may have helped you get there, but it's now on you.
That's a painful truth, though.
It's a painful truth. Painful truth. Like all those people in high school and everything else, they don't know how you're going to end up. So you got to make sure that you constantly are rewriting your book. You have to constantly rewrite your book every day of your life. And these aren't just words I say. This is how I have to live. Like these are conversations I have with myself. And I say it everywhere I go. The most important conversation when you have with yourself.
Yes.
You live with it every single day. But most of our conversations are not the right ones. They're not the ones that are going to push us to the place we need to go. They're the ones that are going to keep us sitting in that toxic environment that you've helped create and everybody else helped create, and you just live in it. You live in that muck, and that conversation just plays in your head, and that becomes you.
Decode some of that conversation that you started with yourself. Like, how does someone listening start that conversation with themselves, and what are the general transitions that you need to start seeing?
So my first conversation when I was absolutely nobody, and that's one thing you have to say. We live in a world now that's so kind. We find the kind way around everything. Like, if you don't look good, I have to find a kind way of saying, I don't like your shirt.
Right.
That's not the approach. If that's the approach you're looking for, that book is not for you. Can't Hurt Me is not for you. The approach you have to take, at least I took, you take whatever approach you want. The conversation had to be a real, honest conversation in the accountability mirror of, guess what? I was fat. Don't find a kind word to say that, you know what? I've gained some weight. No, you're fat. When I couldn't read, not like, hey, you have a learning disability. No, I cannot read. I have a 4th grade reading level. I'm struggling. And sometimes I call myself stupid. Not in a way to put myself down. So don't take it like, my God, those are so hurtful. Yeah, they're hurtful. Dishonest. The conversation has to become an honest conversation of where you're at mentally. Where am I at mentally? I look like shit. I feel like shit. I'm falling behind in school. I'm lazy. My house is a mess. You have to look at what it is and call it what it is. Don't find words to make yourself feel better, because so we hang around people that make us feel better, that tell us what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. And so we stay away from those people. And we stay away from those people, like our internal dialogue becomes that kind, it's okay. It's not okay. So that's where it starts. It starts with that accountability of it's not okay anymore. This can no longer be okay. And calling yourself out for exactly what you are and exactly how you need to fix it. That's where it starts.
I love that. I think that's awesome. I think you're so right that so many of our conversations with others are politically correct.
Exactly.
Therefore, our conversations with ourselves are politically correct, and then we continue to feed the illusion.
That's right.
Right? We continue to feed it.
Nothing gets solved by that, man. Nothing. And if you look at America right now, and I won't get off on this, nothing is getting solved because there's so much racism. There's so many things, and that's just one of them. We can't talk about anything. We are skirting all these conversations because if I say this, I'm going to offend a black person or a white person or a Jewish person or a gay or lesbian person. We skirt around the daggone problem. So we can't fix shit. Everything is like, well, if I say this on TV, I'm going to lose my damn job. We have to say it. We have to break the barriers within our minds, within the world. And it starts with yourself. It starts with yourself. You got to break the barriers down within yourself and just go there. You got to go to yourself.
Absolutely. That was the honest conversation you had then. What's an honest conversation you've been having with yourself this year? Because like you said, and I completely agree with you, it's a constant cycle, it's repetition. We have to keep doing it.
So I talk about the repetition in my book a lot.
Yeah.
Got to get the reps in. So now my conversation is this. I never set out to write a book. When I was in the dungeon and no one was coming back to help me, I just wanted that reflection in that accountability mirror that I hated so badly to be something that gave me pride, to be something that made me feel. It's not about money. It's not about success. It's not about people. Oh my God, that's David Goggins. Sign my book. No. When I started this journey out years ago, it's about, I just want to learn to read. So now I'm at a place now where I see the possibilities of human potential. What are we capable of is the conversation now. The conversation now is how can I now talk to people in a way they can understand the message that I have for so many people. So that's the new conversation now is that you are constantly evolving. You never stay, either you're getting better or you're getting worse, you're not staying the same. So for me, I have to constantly be getting better. I have to constantly be evolving my message. So I'm constantly thinking in the quietness of my mind. That's a key point too. The world is so fast-paced. The world is so noisy. So my conversation now a lot of times is, my God, slow down. The world can take you here, be there, be everywhere. And I lose myself sometimes. So I catch myself in the airport. I catch myself in the plane where I'm writing stuff down. Okay, remember this, remember that. And I'm going, hey, hang on a second, Goggins. What got you here? This isn't what got you here. Slow the fuck down. Go back to the quiet place of that dirty mirror in that $7 a month place you used to live in. That's where you grew. So that's what I'm constantly reminding myself of. Go back to your roots. Now, I'm not saying go back to hell, but I'm saying don't forget where you come from as you start to explode out of the gate when you become someone. My conversation is, do not forget your roots. Do not forget your roots. Don't let this become so big that you lose yourself amongst the noise. Go back to the quietness of what made you successful. That's the conversation now. It's a constant reminder of that.
I love that, man. That's the mantra. Do not forget your roots. Repeat that again and again. And I have a meditation that I developed for myself to do that for me that I want to share with everyone because it aligns so closely in what you're sharing. So every morning I sit and I look at my intentions to do anything. So whether there's a new deal on the table or there's a speaking gig that I've been invited to do or whatever it may be. And in your life, it could be anything, whether you're starting a new business, you're writing a book, it may even just be an Instagram post for whatever it is. And I look at whatever my options are and I ask myself, which ones of these is a seed and which ones of these is a weed? Because the incredible thing in our garden is that weeds end up looking like seeds and can confuse you.
100%.
So often that thing that's giving you ego and pride and fame and control and power looks like it's amazing,
right?
But actually it's just strangling you.
100%.
So every day what I'll do is I'll look at the garden of my life and I will try and unweed my garden. So I'll look at everyone and be like, why am I doing that? And ask me that, why am I doing that? If the answer is not love, compassion, empathy, growth,
right,
personal push, sacrifice, service, if the answer is the opposite, greed, money, power, fame, if those are my reasons, then I have to take that weed out.
100%.
I have to pull it out, because if I don't pull it out, that weed's gonna keep growing.
Right.
And one day it's gonna be so big,
right,
that I wouldn't even have seen it.
Exactly.
And so I'm with you, man.
And that's why when I walked in here, the first thing I do is I want to know the person, because there's so many people right now doing exactly what we're doing. What turns me off so badly is I see so many people out there trying to motivate people, inspire people, help people find what's going to drive you. I see all this shit. It's all fucking a bunch of shit. And I walk in, I see it everywhere. Everybody's got this going. Everybody's got a new podcast, this about I'm going to help you find yourself. They're not living it. They're not living it, which is why I look at people and I'm like, what are you about? Are you actually doing what you say you're doing? Which is why when I heard some of your story, I realized that you have substance to what you're saying, which is why now I can speak to you. A lot of times I go on these podcasts and I don't want to fucking be there, because I start realizing this person is just talking. He's not living. And we share this with people and we expect them to change. They can see right through you. They can see you're not doing this. So that's one thing about it. Don't do everything in your life for money. Don't do everything. Yes, we need it to survive. There's a great drive and passion behind doing things for the mind and the soul. There's a great drive in that. Everybody goes, man, you talk with such passion. This is a life. This is my life. So that's what I want people to get from all this stuff, man. Like, there's something inside you. The brain is the most powerful thing. The mind is the most powerful thing that we have. It's not your phone. It's not the computer. It's not anything. It's your mind. And if you can tap into that, you can come from the daggone roots of hell and become such a great seed, a powerful seed that can grow into some great daggone garden. And people don't get that. It's all up here. The power and the magic's up here.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that, man. And thank you for saying that, because for me too, that was, my desire, what I was sharing with you earlier, is changing people's relationship with perception.
Right.
And when I started, I'll be completely honest, when I started making videos or any of this, and I've been talking about these things and studying them for the past 13 years. And when I started making videos, which was only 2 years ago, I had no idea that anyone would care.
Right.
I made it because I wanted to share what I'd learned.
Right.
And I put it up, and I genuinely thought my life was going to be, I was going to go to my 9-to-5 job, my 9-to-9 job. I used to work 12 hours a day in the corporate world. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make videos on the weekends.
Right.
And hopefully they'll help someone.
Exactly.
Like, there was never a desire for this to be anything more than a service.
Right.
And so when I hear you say that, and also just about how much we perceive each other, and how we perceive other people, etc.
Right.
It's so important for all of us to give each other the benefit of the doubt.
That's right.
And hear from each other.
Right.
To connect.
Exactly.
To see. Like I said that to you earlier, I already knew I was gonna like you.
Right.
I was hoping you were gonna like me.
I didn't know that about you. So I make sure and that's something that's very powerful. A lot of times we hear about someone else through the grapevine. And then I won't like you because I heard from somebody else that they don't like you. Always do your own judging. Always meet the person. Look at the person in the eyes before you say you don't like that person. Listen to their story. Listen to who they are. Listen to where they come from, how they lived. Get your own opinion about people. It's very huge. A lot of people didn't like me coming up because they see this hardness, this crust. Break away at the crust and see what's inside that person.
Absolutely, man. Don't judge a tweet.
No.
Don't judge one post.
No.
Don't judge one message.
And don't judge somebody from 30 freaking years ago. Or I say 30 fucking years ago. There's so much stuff going on right now in the world. People are trying to evolve. Let them evolve.
Yes.
Let them evolve. Don't bring them back don't bring them back where they came from.
Yes.
Don't bring, if someone wants to get better, don't bring them back to where you knew them when they were a piece of shit. Let them fly. And if you feel like hell because they went away and they escaped the hell that you all once lived in, fix yourself. Fix yourself. Don't hold them accountable because they got away. Don't constantly remind them that they were once here. Fix yourself. Because a lot of people feel like crap once people start to leave their little nest, like if you're an alcoholic and this guy says, I'm gonna stop drinking. You wanna bring them right back in. No, look at yourself in the mirror and say, wow, this guy's doing better. Take that feeling of feeling like shit and do something about it. Change your own life.
Absolutely. Well said, man. Well said. Do you think we do that subconsciously? We don't want to see other people grow and fly because we're not growing and flying.
It's 100%. It makes us feel like shit. It's a constant reminder of where we're at in life.
If you want even more videos just like this one, make sure you subscribe and click on the boxes over here. I'm also excited to let you know that you can now get my book, Think Like a Monk, from thinklikeamonkbook.com. Check below in the description to make sure you order today.
These companies have organizations called taste institutes where they hire craving experts and they design their products in a specific way to create the bliss point of the food. What is that perfect crunch, taste, sugar, whatever it is, salt? And it's about dopamine. It's like heroin or cocaine. One of the top executives from one of the big soda companies said to me, Mark, you want to come to our lab and see what we've done? We've actually been able to extract the taste buds from humans and we grow them in a culture in the lab and then we can stimulate them and see what's happening. I'm like, you do not want me to go in there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose. I'm so glad you come back every single week to listen, learn, and grow. And today I'm super excited to be interviewing a guest that I actually had on Instagram Live a few months ago. And we weren't able to dive in even as deep as I wanted to in that Instagram Live, which was amazing. So I thought, why not bring him onto the podcast where I can really quiz him on the things that I'm interested about, the things that I know, insights that will really help you, and of course, get to know each other better. So today's guest is none other than Dr. Mark Hyman. He's a practicing family physician and an internationally recognized leader, speaker, educator, and advocate in the field of functional medicine. He's the founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center, the head of strategy and innovation of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, a 13-time New York Times best-selling author, and board president for clinical affairs for the Institute for Functional Medicine. Now, he's the host of one of the leading health podcasts, The Doctor's Pharmacy. Highly recommend listening to it and checking it out. Dr. Hyman is a regular medical contributor to several TV shows and networks, including CBS, This Morning, Today, Good Morning America, The View, and CNN. He's also an advisor and guest co-host on the Dr. Oz Show. This is an episode I'm so excited about where we will dive deep into how to save our health, our economy, our communities, and our planet one bite at a time with a discussion about his latest book, Food Fix. Welcome to the show, Mark Hyman.
Thank you so much. Sweet. Thank you, Jay. So fun to be with you.
It's so fun to be with you. I loved our Instagram Live. We were just sharing. We did that just before lockdown and the pandemic and everything kind of shifted. And I'm remembering back to doing it with you. And I loved it so much. And I'm so glad we're actually getting to spend this quality time together now and really dive into this great book you've written.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really the culmination of a life's work to connect the dots between everything we love and care about and how they're connected in ways that we don't imagine, but that if we actually solve the problem of food, we solve the problems of chronic disease, of the stress in our economy, of the disintegration of our communities, of racism, of environmental destruction, climate change, national security, kids' education. I mean, all of it's connected to food. And it's really such a joy to be able to share how those things are connected and actually what we can do about it. Because it's not called food apocalypse, it's called food fix.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can't wait to dive into all areas of that with you, because I think we don't realize how powerful and influential food is, not just in our bodies, not just in our minds, but in the world. And I know that inside this book, you've gone into so many studies and so much research to really show the impact of food in the world. But I actually want to start somewhat a bit more personal with you, because I was discovering some fascinating things about you. And this was one that I loved. that I feel there's no better way to start this interview than letting our audience know that you were a yoga teacher before you were a doctor.
That is true. I mean,
that fascinated me. When I was like, wow, that's cool.
I majored in Buddhism and Asian studies and Asian religions in college, and I wasn't going to be a doctor. I was going to be a monk.
I remember.
And I actually decided, well, I'm not sure I want to be a monk. Maybe I'll just try to be a doctor and be of service in that way. And it was really driven out of the notion of compassion and service that was so embedded in Buddhism, and I learned about in college. So yeah, and I then became a yoga teacher and decided to become a doctor after that. So it was an afterthought, but I'm still working at it.
I love that. Well, when we get onto that, it means you're thinking like a monk for sure. So I love that. But tell me about how you think that, tell me a bit more about that compassion piece that you were sharing there, because I think it's really interesting that, people get involved in medicine for so many reasons. People get involved in being authors for so many reasons, but it sounds like your kind of foundation was wanting to help people, wanting to make a difference.
Yeah.
That was the
I think, when I really studied Buddhism, I was obviously looking for answers as a young man of 18, 19 years old, and what's the truth and what's the meaning of life. And in it, I realized it was a description of how to heal suffering. And the focus of Buddhism isn't a religion, it's a methodology for healing and relieving suffering and understanding the way our minds work that cause us to suffer so much. And I began to really focus on this notion of how we don't have to suffer and why we suffer. And it was really that led me to understanding that I could actually be in that space of service and working on healing through not just, being a monk, but actually being a doctor and actually helping patients and people understand how to heal chronic disease, which is what I do. And so I think, there's so much suffering in the world. And there's so much burden that everybody suffers from, both psychologically, physically, in so many different ways. And I was really drawn to doing something to help deal with that. And that's really what led me to becoming a doctor.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really unique way of looking at it, because I think for so many of us, sometimes we can be dealing with physical or emotional pain or issues for such a long time before we even think that there's something we need to do about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are living with chronic issues for such a long time, and we don't really listen or hear from the body or from the mind what we need to change. So when you look at it that way, that you can change what suffering you choose and what you allow in, it's huge. Tell me one more thing. Sorry, go on. You were going to say something.
No, I'm just saying, what's your mission in life? It's really to end needless suffering. There's some suffering you can't avoid, but there is a lot of needless suffering. And the place where I feel most effective is really helping people understand that they can heal from chronic disease using a new strategy, which is functional medicine. It's really an approach of using food as medicine, but it's understanding the root causes. It's understanding the body as a system. It's really helping restore and regenerate health as opposed to treat disease. And people suffer unnecessarily. And I think this goal for my life has really been to sort of bring this way of thinking and helping people into a broader perspective. And that's really what I do at Cleveland Clinic. We're publishing research on this. It's really gratifying to see that actually that it's catching on, that people now understand what this is, that they understand that our current medical paradigm isn't really solving a lot of their problems. And, I got there because I was sick. I got very, very ill when I was young from chronic fatigue, living in China, got mercury poisoning, and ended up having just, my body just collapsed. And I had to literally reverse engineer my way to health using principles of functional medicine of how to restore my health. And I realized it was applicable to so many patients, people with autoimmune diseases and digestive disorders and mood disorders and Alzheimer's and autism and diabetes and metabolic issues. All the things that people suffer from that we don't really deal well with traditional medicine is what I really focused on. Yeah,
that's incredible. And I love how so much of the good we do always comes from some sort of pain in our own life.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you've been able to go and take it so far, and not just take it far, but you're really challenging the status quo. Let's start there actually. We're in Food Fix. I doubt people take the time to actually think that the food industry has an agenda of their own. But can you share some ways in which the industry is strategic in how it advances its own goals and missions? I feel like most of us don't expect it.
Oh boy, that's a can of worms. So there are a lot of unintended consequences that have led to our current food system that were born out of good intentions, right? We wanted to feed the world. We wanted to have the ability to grow lots of food for a lot of people and provide a lot of calories at scale and modernize agriculture. And that was happening in the 50s and 60s, which led to this commercialization of industrial agriculture, which led to enormous amounts of starchy industrial food being produced, right? So we were all enamored with, astronaut food and processed food and Tang instead of orange juice. And unfortunately, that's led to a method of growing food that's produced the worst food on the planet. It's mostly ultra processed food, which is made from soy, corn, and wheat in different extruded colors, sizes, shapes, and forms. It's all deadly, about 60% of our calories. And it's also led to destruction of the environment through destruction of the soil and biodiversity of plants and animals and insects, and also stresses on our water and increasing climate change and the pollution from the incredible amount of pesticides and herbicides. And we use 6 billion pounds around the world of glyphosate, which is pretty toxic. And we use 400 billion pounds of nitrogen fertilizer, which has all kinds of devastating consequences. So the way we're growing the food and the food that we're growing is devastating our health and devastating planetary health. And so the problem is that the food industry is the biggest industry on the planet. It's trillion with a T dollar industry that is now trying to maintain the status quo, unfortunately, which is not a good one. So it wasn't like they said, oh, we're going to make people sick and fat and we're going to destroy the environment. They just didn't know, but now they know. And so there's a very concerted effort to control our food policy, which is, as a doctor, why would I be caring about politics and food policy? But it occurred to me as I'm sitting in my office seeing patients one-on-one that I can't cure diabetes in my office. It's cured in the kitchen, in the grocery store, on the farm. And I need to sort of look upstream and look at the root causes. And then begin to say, well, what's causing the food that they're eating that's making them sick? Well, it's the food system. What causes the food system? It's our food policies. And why do we have the food policies we have? Because it's a food lobby that drives that. And so they drive a lot of the status quo. And they do it in government policy. And we spend $500 million just on the Farm Bill. In 1 year, in 2005, the GMO labeling law was defeated because the food industry collectively spent $192 million on one bill in lobby. And they do this by driving our dietary guidelines policy, our agricultural policies that promote the growth of these raw materials or commodities for ultra-processed food. They do it through controlling what we can say on food labels. They control the restrictions on marketing, so we can't actually limit marketing for junk food. And across the whole multiple 10 agencies of the government, there's so many policies that are influencing our food system that are often at odds with each other, contradictory, but they're in the interest of the food industry. So that's happening. And then they're also co-opting science. So the National Institute of Health spends $1 billion on research for nutrition. The food industry spends $12 billion. Most of it's propaganda, like, if the Dairy Council says milk is nature's perfect food, well, all the studies show that. Or Coca-Cola finds that, when they fund a study that obesity has nothing to do with soda, so it doesn't make sense. They also fund groups that are front groups, like the American Council on Science and Health, which sounds like a great noble cause, or Crop Life, or the group for sustainable agriculture, and they're all front groups for the food industry to propagate their agenda and create misinformation. And then they co-opt public health groups, so like the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, Academy of Nutrition Dietetics. 40% of their budget is from the food industry, so they're not giving independent advice. And then they co-opt social groups like the NAACP and Hispanic Federation and groups that are doing good in the world. They fund them. For example, I was showing a movie that I was in a number of years called Fed Up, which is about childhood obesity and the problems we have with the food industry and sugar and starch. And I went down there and I met with the head of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is Martin Luther King's church, met with his daughter, Bernice King, and they were very excited to get behind this and have a screening at the King Center in Atlanta. And I was excited about this. And a few days later, I got a call and said, we can't have this showing at the King Center. I'm like, why? So, well, Coca-Cola funds the food industry, funds the King Center. So it's pretty frightening when you see all these different strategies to target certain groups, to put out wrong science, to support misinformation through these front groups, through influencing public health groups, through controlling policy. And it's it's a really devastating effect, which has led to the fact that 6 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease, that 75% of us are overweight, that 42% are obese, that 88% are metabolically unhealthy. I mean, just take that in for a minute. 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy. That means 88% are not. And these people are at more risk for COVID-19 and other chronic diseases. So we really have this crisis moment here. And I think we need to understand how all these things are related. And then we need to design a strategy to both from a grassroots level, from a business innovation level, from philanthropy, and from clearly policy to change what's happening.
Wow. I mean, that is one news update in a great way. I was with you the whole time. You know, when I hear that and I think about my community, my audience listening or watching or anyone consuming this right now, it's like it can feel very overwhelming to an individual, for the individual that doesn't have the feeling of just like, there's two things that come to mind. One is like, do these people realize that they're actually destroying people's lives? Because, you know, it almost, at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not like it started that way, but now that people are aware and we continue to fund it in that direction, it may leave people feeling quite helpless. Where is a great place for people to get started? Of course, this book, for people to get educated, because I feel like the biggest challenge in making choices when you're like, oh my God, I can't trust the labels. I can't trust the ingredients on the back. Where do people trust? Where do they find trust is really good.
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time when I wrote the book Food Fix to dive into practical solutions, both for individuals, for businesses, policies. And I created a Food Fix action guide. It's free. They can go to foodfixbook.com and download it. Essentially, it gives you 20 of the top things you can do as citizens and individuals to have an impact to change your health and change society and change planetary health and drive policy and drive businesses. And it works. When we change what we want to do, and we vote with our wallet, we vote with our voice, we vote with our fork, and we vote with our vote, we see massive change. I mean, General Mills and Danone, which are two big food companies, are now funding farmers to convert their lands to regenerative agriculture. So they're literally stepping up and doing what the government isn't doing and funding farmers to transform agriculture to produce nutrient-dense food in a way that restores the soil, restores the plant nutrition, and restores human health. That's groundbreaking, and it's because we can make those choices. So I talk about how do you become a regenitarian? How do you regenerate your own health, and how do you regenerate planetary health and our social communities and their health? And it's pretty simple, right? It's eating real food. It's not buying into the industrial food that we're all eating, which is hard to do for some people, but I give real clear resources on what to look for, where to buy things that are not necessarily expensive, because people think it's expensive to do this, but it actually can be done really at scale and in a way that isn't going to break the bank. You have to become a smart consumer. You have to read food labels. You have to seek out different sources of food, whether it's community-supported agriculture or farmers markets or online retailers that sell direct to consumer, like Thrive Market or Mariposa Ranch, which actually sell regeneratively raised beef and other animal foods that are really healthy for you. And there's things you can do if you get inspired in your own community. You can be an agent of change, right? Maybe you want to get your local government to start a compost ordinance. So you'll compost your food, because food waste is a huge problem. Like 40% of our food is wasted, and it's one of the biggest drivers of climate change. It's a bigger contributor of methane than cows. And it's all your vegetables you're throwing in the compost. In the landfill. And you can actually start to understand how to do these things for yourself. You maybe have a compost pile in your group. If you want to become an activist, you can turn up the heat on your politicians and food companies by finding organizations that are doing it and supporting them, or lobbying your representatives. I mean, you can actually have an impact locally, and you can decide maybe you want to work in your school and help the school lunch and nutrition be better. And people have done that. And so in the book is just full of examples of actually how to take control of your own health and your own life and your own community. And it's working. I mean, it's why we're seeing the changes we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for creating that action guide, everyone. That's foodfixbook.com if you want to go and grab that, because I think that's what people are looking for. I really believe that people are looking for action guides because that's where they know they need to start. And one of the things that I'm fascinated by when I was looking at the book, and I've been looking at your work, you talk about how I think it's like the average child between something like 2 and 13 or 14, you say, like sees on average like 10 to 11 junk food ads per day on
Oh,
TV.
it's terrible. I mean, the average kid sees probably 10,000 ads a year.
Yeah.
And that's television. Now we're seeing stealth advertising. So a lot of these studies were done on food marketing to kids. There's about $17 billion spent in 2004 when it was tracked on junk food advertising to kids. And the worse the food, the more the ads, and the worse the ads were. So, and now Facebook, for example, last year had, 500 billion ads for junk food on Facebook, right? It's just unbelievable how much. And there's stealth games for kids, like advert games, where they're literally embedded propaganda for food companies. So little McDonald's, go to the McDonald's store and go to, get your Burger King, whatever. It's terrifying. So we see the biggest impact actually is this changes in food marketing. And in this country, there's the First Amendment. You can't restrict people's right to free speech. And but I don't think there's any law that prohibits us from protecting our children from these kinds of messages, because they can't tell the difference between reality and an ad until they're about 8 or 9 years old, and they're targeting these kids. And in Chile, when they actually repealed the ability or removed the ability for these companies to market between 6 a.m. and I think 10 p.m., there was dramatic reduction in the use of these foods and dramatic reductions in obesity. But this country doesn't want to do that because it's such a big moneymaker for these companies.
Yeah, that's really alarming, because ultimately the people making the decisions are obviously aware that the food's not healthy for people and it's not going to benefit their body or their mind, but they still continue to invest in creating challenges for kids. And I always, whenever I get asked randomly to invest or be a spokesperson for different brands or whatever it may be, and whenever it's something that's aimed at young people, I'm always just like, well, I always ask them, how old's your son or daughter? And they'll tell me their age. And I'll be like, would you recommend them to use this product? And the amount of times I've heard people say, no, I wouldn't. But I'm like, but you're selling this, I'm just so confused by that. Do you think that's the level at which we have to change it? Like, it needs to change on the level where people go, my profitability is not as important as people's children. I
think that's changing. I was really excited to hear, there's this group called the Business Roundtable, which is all the top businesses in America. They get together, the CEOs. And in the last meeting, they made a stand. They said, we have to look not only at shareholder value, but stakeholder value. Meaning, what is the impact of our company on our customers, on the workers, on the environment? Who are the stakeholders in the products we're creating? And it's not just about profit and shareholder value, which I thought was a big step forward. So I think we're seeing more movements towards conscious capitalism, but there's definitely entrenched companies that just don't want to change, and they're not going to do it voluntarily. So there has to be sort of a parallel system that grows up that shows that this can happen. And I think we're doing it. And I want it to happen faster, but I think it's happening.
Yeah, and how much of it is also, and I know you know the answer to this, but it's how much of it also is our addiction and habits because of the way those products have been created. So we also find it hard to let go of them. So I'll give you a personal example. I grew up eating 4 sugar products a day when I was young. And so, 4 chocolate products a day. Sorry, not 4 sugar, 4 chocolate products a day. And so I would eat a chocolate biscuit, a chocolate bar, a chocolate ice cream, and a chocolate yogurt nearly every single day of my life. And I was overweight as a child. I struggled with it, whether it was bullying or whether it was just feeling unhealthy. And as I grew older, I started to realize that I was addicted to sugar, especially in chocolate. And I got so used to having it. And it took me to, who I've talked to you about before, meeting my wife, who was able to find me alternatives. Because that's what I said to my wife. I was like, I need an alternative if I'm going to have to shake this habit.
Yeah.
And so I ended up finding things sweetened with monk fruit and other things, which have been amazing. But
that's good for you, monk fruit, right?
I know, how ironic. I do not own the brand or have any affiliation with it whatsoever. but the intriguing thing to me about that is that there are alternatives that exist. But I want to share this for the audience. It's like, I get what it feels like to be addicted to a food that may not be good for you. But tell us about how much we're addicted to these foods.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real problem, Jay, and I think most people don't realize it, and they internalize the feelings they have about what they eat and blame themselves. So, oh, why can't I stop eating this? Oh, I'm gaining weight and I just can't stop myself. And they think it's their fault that they're overweight or that they're sick. And that is just a bunch of nonsense, and scientific nonsense, because when you look at the science of these foods, these ultra processed pulverized foods that are high in starch and sugar, they're really designed to hijack our brain chemistry, our hormones, and our metabolism in a very specific way. And these companies have organizations called taste institutes, where they hire craving experts in the science of craving, and they design their products in a specific way to create the bliss point of the food. What is that perfect crunch, taste, sugar, whatever it is, salt, that's going to make you go boom and have this pleasure sensation? And it's about dopamine. It's like heroin or cocaine, and it works in the same area of the brain. And it's not just a theory. They know this. Of course, they deny it. Although one of the top executives from one of the big soda companies said to me, "Mark, you want to come to our lab and see what we've done? We've actually been able to extract the taste buds from humans, and we grow them in a culture in the lab, and then we can stimulate them and see what's happening." I'm like, you do not want me to go in there, because I'll put this all over social media. and it's a very scary thing. And so the science has shown, for example, that if you take a group of overweight guys and one day you give them a milkshake that's a regular milkshake, and the next day you give them a trick milkshake, which is exactly the same except for the way in which the sugar is absorbed. So there's starch, and there's the same carbohydrate, the same protein, the same fat, the same fiber, the same calories. So exactly the same, and they taste the same. So they don't know what they're drinking. When they found that when they had the one that had the sugar that was absorbed quickly compared to the one that's absorbed slowly, it created this pattern in their brain that lit up the same area called the nucleus accumbens as heroin or cocaine. And you could see it on a functional MRI. So this is not just a theory that, oh, it's maybe addictive. It's not really a true addiction. It actually is. And when they looked at their other biomarkers, their blood levels of insulin, sugar, adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones, you literally eat sugar, your stress hormones go up. So you can be meditating all day, but if you're eating sugar all day, you're in trouble. And I think we don't understand how powerful these foods are and how they hijack our biology. But within a very short time, literally just 10 days or less, you literally can reset your biology, reset your brain chemistry, reset your hormones and your taste buds, and get out of it. And I remember I ran this course once in a Kripalu, which is a yoga center near me.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. And it was sort of a sugar detox. And this woman came in, she's like, "There's no way I can do this. I've been addicted to sugar my whole life. I'm never going to be able to get off this." I said, "Just do exactly what I'm saying and just try to do this and eat in a way that's going to reset your biology, because food is medicine." And she's like, "Okay, I'll try it." With day 2, she's like, "I can't believe it. I don't have any more cravings. I don't want it. I don't need it. It's like my whole biology has changed." So I think people can be very empowered by making those kinds of changes.
And does it, just to dive into that slightly, a tiny bit more, should that change for people be extreme, or is it incremental? So it's like, let's say someone's listening, they are consuming too much sugar, or they're having too many sodas or whatever. Is it like they should go the next day, no sodas? What's that? Almost that 10-day program. What
yeah. So do you have like 1 ounce less of soda a day, or 12 sodas is 11? Okay. Yeah. I think as a doctor, I want people to be able to have the experience of health. It's like an awakening. I want them to actually quickly be able to experience that. So I usually can convince people to do a dramatic change for a short time, like a week or 10 days. And then their bodies tell them how they feel. They go, "Oh my God, my migraines are gone. My digestion's better. I'm sleeping better. My sinus drip is gone. My skin's clearing up. My acne's gone. I feel better. I don't have cravings. My energy's good." And they go, "Well, wow, I'm getting the connection between what I eat and how I feel." Yeah. And so I always love to give people that experience. And I created a program called the 10-Day Reset. And it's essentially giving them that opportunity. You can download it free at getpharmacy.com. It's just a simple way of eating in a specific time frame, in a specific way that's going to really regulate your biology. Because every bite of food you take regulates your entire biology. It changes your gene expression. It changes your hormones, your brain chemistry, your immune system, your microbiome, everything. Literally with every bite. And when you understand that, and you can upgrade or downgrade your biology literally with every bite, your biological software can change you can really see rapid changes. And we've seen incredible things from people, getting off insulin in 3 days, for example. So it's really powerful when people make the choice to try this. And I think, tiny steps and tiny habit changes are good. And BJ Fogg talks about this for some things. But I think if you really want to see the power of this, a short-term dramatic change can give you enormous benefit.
I'm completely with you on that. I think that when you experience something immersively in an extreme way, you're more likely to quickly feel the benefits of it and to recognize it's powerful. Now, that may mean you may go back to your old habit quicker, but you now know what you're trying to move towards, as opposed to not having a tangible experience. So I'm perfectly with you. I wanted to check that with an expert. that definitely, I can totally relate to that. Tell me about, you talk a lot about in the book, and what I'm really trying to do for anyone who's listening or watching right now is, the book is just fun, and you can already tell Dr. Mark Hyman is a phenomenal storyteller. He's got a ton of great studies that, I'm massively into studies. And so anytime I get into studies, I'm like, I get really fascinated, intrigued. The book is full of the insights, the tools and the actions that you can take in each of these areas. But I do believe that the first step is education and awareness. So I'm hoping that as you're listening to this, the podcast is going to give you the insight about each of these areas of our life that food impacts. But when you read the book, that's going to give you the full set of, what part of it you need to change and where the action is. So what I'm fascinated by in the book is you talk a lot about how there's food racism. And I think that this is so obviously relevant right now. And so important for people to understand, because I think either we don't believe it exists or we're so consumed by it that we're not conscious of it. Explain that concept to us.
Well, I mean, I think, we have certain populations in this country that are so disproportionately affected by chronic disease and by poor health. The African-American community, Hispanic community, Native American communities. And when you look at COVID-19, it is far and away hurting these populations more than anybody else. For example, in Louisiana and Chicago, African-Americans are 30% of the population, but 70% of the deaths. Native Americans are experiencing the same thing. And if you're African-American in America, you have twice the rate of getting diabetes. You have probably 4 times the rate of getting kidney failure and 3.5 times likely to get amputations because of diabetes. And you're targeted more than the rest of the population. The food marketing is often more directed to minorities. And we see this. This is from Yale's studies that have shown that we actually are targeting these populations more. So these health disparities are huge. And there are a lot of reasons for it. I mean, there's what we call it structural violence. We talk about structural racism, but there's a bigger concept, which is what are the structural violence, the social, economic, political conditions, environmental conditions that are driving disease. Right? We see this with whether infectious disease or chronic disease. And this is what we have in America. We have this structural violence that has led to incredible amounts of disease in these populations. It's leading to these health disparities. And we have to understand why. And the reasons are complex, right? There's the racism issues and the segregation we had and the lack of access to education, housing and opportunity and funding. And there's a lot of issues. But the problem with food is that it drives these populations to be more sick, less able to learn in school, less able to succeed in life, and more likely to get disability and chronic disease as they get older. So we see this sort of dismantling of these populations in scale in ways that we don't see in other populations. And it's really heartbreaking because it's so fixable. And I've seen this happen. I went down, and even if you're poor and you're white, a lot of these things are still evident. And as part of that movie, Fed Up, I went down to this little town in Easley, South Carolina. There was a family of 5 living in a trailer, food stamps and disability. The father was 42, already on dialysis from kidney failure from diabetes. The mother was like overweight, 200+ pounds. The son was practically diabetic at 16. And I said, listen, I'm not going to lecture you. Let's just cook a meal together. Here's what's in your kitchen. Like, here's all the junk. And I showed him everything that they were eating they thought was fine. Like Cool Whip, which said 0 trans fat, but was all trans fat because the FDA left a loophole that said if you have less than 0.5 gram per serving, you can say no trans fat, but it's all air. So it's just all the food industry influence. And they were like horrified. And then I said, let's cook a meal of turkey chili. Let's create a nice salad with olive oil and vinegar dressing and salt and pepper. Let's stir fry some asparagus. Let's roast some sweet potatoes. Simple meal. It wasn't expensive. And they actually loved it. They never cooked in their kitchen before. And I just gave a little bit of education. I said, here's a guide on how to eat well for less, good food on a tight budget from the Environmental Working Group, and where I'm on the board. And I gave them a cookbook. I said, you can do this. And they did it. And within a year, they lost 200 pounds together. The father was able to lose enough to get a new kidney. The son lost 50, but then went to work at Bojangles, which is a fast food restaurant down in the South. And it's the only place you can get a job for these kids there. And he gained 50 pounds. It was like it's putting an alcoholic to work in a bar. Yeah. And then he figured it out, and he lost 138 pounds, and he got into medical school. He asked me to write a letter of recommendation. So people can actually come out of this if they're given the right education tools. But I've worked in these communities and populations, and they just don't know. They just are unaware of this sort of level of food racism and food even apartheid that's happening in these communities, where you see the lack of ability to access food and lack of ability to find, quality ingredients because they're buying food at the gas station. That's where they get their food.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising awareness about this super important issue, because I feel like it's just not talked about.
No.
Yeah, go on. No, sorry, go on.
It's internalized, like I went on a rafting trip, and I read the story in the book with a Hopi chief, who's a Native American chief, and he lives in one of the oldest inhabited cities in America, Robbie, which has been, somebody's lived in there for over 1,000 years. And he was very, very overweight, and he was just struggling to get down to the raft, and threw up because he just was so out of shape. We got on the raft, and we kind of got to know each other. I said, you can actually fix this. You can get rid of your diabetes. He said, well, what do I have to do? He said, well, I said, well, you have to get rid of the starch and sugar in your diet, the sodas and the sweets and all that. He's like, wow, well, okay, but what are we going to do for our traditional Hopi ceremonial foods? We have these traditional Hopi ceremonial foods. And I'm like, what foods? He's like, cookies, cakes, pies. And I'm like thinking to myself, those are not your traditional ceremonial foods. And what's happened was that the government put everybody on reservations. They cut off their food supply and their traditional ways of hunting or fishing or even growing food. They diverted, in the Hopi reservation, they diverted their water, so they had no access to rivers anymore. And then they piled in these commodity foods, flour, sugar, and shortening, right? And that became their diet. And these government commodities were the staples. So they made Indian fry bread and Indian tacos. There's nothing Indian about that. And these foods are so toxic. And now that's why we see 80% of them have diabetes by the time they're 30. And life expectancy in some of these communities is 46. And it's terrible. And it's not just the Native American communities, but he's internalized this food concepts that he thinks are his traditional foods. And this is true in the African American communities and Latino communities. And I think in Chicago, there's something called the Chicago Loop. If you live outside the Loop, your life expectancy is 16 years less. If you take a subway from Midtown Manhattan to the Bronx, which is a very poor African American communities, your life expectancy goes down 6 months for every subway stop. Wow. To Harlem and to the Bronx. So these things are really not talked about much. And I gave a lecture a few years ago. It was on the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination at the Harlem Riverside Church. And it was really about food oppression. And, it was a little intimidating for me because it was mostly African-American community. I'm a white Jewish guy, from New York. And what do I know about it? But it was, Governor Cuomo spoke there. I spoke, and I just was able to share what I was seeing from the science and from the data about how these communities were being affected. And it was an incredible response, and people really resonated with it. It's a very short 10-minute talk. You can find it online. Just do Hyman food oppression, you'll find it. But it sort of is really catapulted me into really trying to raise these issues, because we can't resurrect our communities unless we resurrect our health. And we can't resurrect our health unless we resurrect our food. And we can't resurrect our food until we fix the food system and fix the agriculture and sort of pull that thread that connects everything together.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm trying to do in our interview today is really understand the role of the individual and educating the individual, because I feel like if the individual is educated, then we'll start to see this real change. Tell me about, we've definitely tapped into this, but we talked a lot about how it impacts our physical health. But I know in the book you also talk about how nutrition and food can actually be medicine for our mental health.
Yeah.
And I think that this link again, I feel like what you're doing in the book is just topics that at least I can be honest and say, I'm not hearing about in a non-conspiracy theory communication. So if I hear about some of this stuff, it's always through someone who loves conspiracy theories. I don't love conspiracy theories. No. I like data and fact and discussion and change and transformation. And so that's what I think you do so well in this book. But let's talk to me about the connection between mental health and our diets. And
Jay, it was a surprise to me. I was practicing functional medicine, working with patients. They'd come in with these physical complaints. They'd have an autoimmune disease, or they would have some digestive issues, or whatever was going on, or they'd have ADD, whatever. And I would treat them and restore their health by dealing with restoring these basic biological systems: your gut, your immune system, your detoxification system, your hormones, all the things that we do in functional medicine. And a lot of it's using food as medicine. And then they would report back, Dr. Hyman, I don't know what happened, but my depression's gone. My panic attacks are gone. My ADD's better. My memory's better. My brain fog's gone. I'm like, what's going on here? And I began to really investigate what was happening. And I sort of jokingly call myself the accidental psychiatrist, because I was treating people's body and their brain was getting better. And I began to realize that, let's just take depression, for example. Depression turns out is an inflammatory disease, which we don't think of. It's like, it's like a sore throat, but it's in your brain. And your brain, doesn't hurt, but it can be depressed or feel sad or be anxious or have OCD or ADD or whatever. And so it has different ways of expressing that inflammation, whether it's Alzheimer's even is an inflammatory disease, autism is inflammatory. And the question is, what's driving the inflammation? And it's primarily our inflammatory processed nutrient poor diet. It's this industrial diet. It's lacking the nutrients that our bodies and our brains need to function. And I just saw case after case after I started people on a whole foods diet, took out the processed food, got rid of inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, got rid of the sugar, gave them a moment to sort of heal, and then put in the nutrients that their bodies needed. Miracles were happening. And I began to sort of go, wow, the body is so connected to the brain. And so, yes, there's a mind-body effect, but there's also a body-mind effect. And that body-mind effect is worth fixing, because you can do something about it. If you want to deal with your mental health issues, if you want to become enlightened, it's a lot easier to do it if you deal with the problems first. If your gut is healthy, if you are not low thyroid functioning, if your nutrition levels or vitamin D is good, or your B12 level is good, it's much easier to actually get to what you want to do in terms of your spiritual goals or your personal goals if you are feeling good, right? It's a lot harder to get enlightened if you're mercury poisoning or you have some nasty thing going on in your body. And so this really was the genesis of this book, The Ultra Mind Solution, about how we fix our minds and our bodies by fixing our body first. It's not that we don't have to work on our minds as well, because that's your lane. but it was such an insight for me to go, wow, there's so many people suffering from mental health issues that are driven by physical issues.
No, it's 1000%, it's all interconnected. And even I find like sometimes people need their mind's help to change their body, and they need their body's help to change their mind. And I think the fixation over either or where do I start, it's almost like we need to be absorbed in all of it. Like I found that, and I can identify with what you're saying, that I was someone who focused a lot on my mind and was able to find a lot of peace and calm in my mind, but then I found that I'd neglected my body. And it was almost like real alignment in your life is felt when your body and mind are aligned, right?
Yeah.
You can't have a advanced mind and a neglected body. That's not alignment. That's going to constantly cause friction in your life. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with what you're saying, where if people are feeling mind fog or struggling with a mental health illness and they're not taking care of their body and, like you said, their brain, then again, you can't switch that. So I totally see the interconnectedness, and I hope more and more people listening will realize that when you read the book, Food Fix, that you'll be able to start making those tweaks that you need to in your lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, even education, I talk about in the book, and how our kids are so impaired. I mean, 1 in 10 kids has ADD. Kids have learning difficulties, dyslexia, challenges with, academic performance. And the CDC put out a report that I talk about in the book on the influence of nutrition on academic performance. And it's massive. How do kids learn when they're eating junk food and going to school in the morning with flaming hot chips and a Coke? They can't function, and then they crash. And so providing good nutrition can have radical effects on kids' academic performance and close what we call an achievement gap. And I think it also affects behavior. I think, we think about mood, but one of the things I was shocked to discover is that violence and violent behavior and aggression are also connected to our diet. And in prison studies that I talk about in the book, prisoners who are violent, who are fed a whole foods healthy diet in prison, can you reduce violent crime by 56%? And if you add a multivitamin, it goes down by 80%. If you do it in kids in juvenile detention centers, these kids, 91% reduction in bad behavior and violence, 100% reduction in suicides. I mean, it's just staggering. And if there was a pill that could do that, everybody would be taking it. There'd be a giant pharmaceutical company marketing, and we don't hear about these issues because they're not something that's going to create billions of dollars in profit. But unfortunately, it's where the real effect can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Everyone, I want to recommend that you not only go listen to the Doctor's Pharmacy podcast, but you also check out the book, Food Fix, that I have next to me right now. Again, huge recommendation for the book, to get educated, become aware of what's really happening, what's working in the background. That's going to give you enough confidence and enough of a reason and a why to go and actually make the changes in your life. It's really easy to live in ignorance and in the pain and just allow for it to continue and feel like it's only because something outside's impacting you, but actually take responsibility for our health and our futures is huge. And if not for yourself, then at least your children and the future generations. And Dr. Mark Hyman, I believe you're doing such a great service. Honestly, you really are in raising all of these issues in all areas, and the depth of the research and the lengths you've gone through to share this with us. I'm super, super grateful.
Thank you.
We end every interview with something called the final five, which are your fast five round, which is answers in one word to one sentence maximum.
Okay, all right.
And Dr. Hyman, these are your final five. So question number one, what's the best change you've made in your diet?
The best change I made was to dramatically cut out starch and sugar. I don't eliminate it, but I really don't eat any flour products. And if I eat sugar, it's usually part of some whole food, right? Maybe I'll have a, whole huge chocolate, which I love, which is, very low glycemic. And I think that and getting rid of industrial food has been the best things I've done.
I love that.
And of course, adding in all the good stuff.
Of course, super practical. Okay, great. Second question. What do you know to be absolutely true about health that a lot of people would disagree with you on?
Wow, that's a good question. No one's ever asked me that, Jay. I think that the biggest thing that people don't understand is that, the way we define disease is completely wrong. So our normal conception of disease is completely flawed because it's not based on causes, it's based on symptoms. So I think people just don't understand that. And so if you focus on causes, not symptoms, and treat that, the root cause, people get better.
I love that. Great answer. All right. Third question. What gives you the biggest hope for the food industry?
I see hope because I see these food companies waking up. I see companies like General Mills and Danone and other companies and Nestle really understanding that this can't go on, that their survival depends on transforming our food system. So I see the culture shifting and people demanding more consciousness about their food. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Question number 4. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 12 months?
Wow. Well, I've been traveling for 25 years and on the road, and COVID has locked me down. And I've realized that having a rhythm and stability and quiet and time to think is actually a good thing. and I think I've really learned that it's time in my life to shift how I'm doing things so I can actually cultivate more of that.
That's brilliant. And your fifth and final question is, if you could create a law that everyone in the world would have to follow, what would it be?
Ooh, a law that everyone would have to follow. Well, I think it would be a law that all governments would implement, that would influence every single policy around food, which would be quality is king. So no food policy can be made unless it's putting the quality of nutrition and nutritional density first in every single thing we do, whether it's dietary guidelines or what food we grow or what food we market or whatever it is, it's going to transform everything if we can do that.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm actually going to ask you one more question that's just come to my mind. Do you think that it's possible to create healthy food that's affordable?
Absolutely. I mean, the studies are really clear that it may cost 50 cents more a day to eat healthier. And like I said, there are guides like Good Food on a Tight Budget that are actually incredibly effective in helping people eat well for less. It's good for them, good for the planet, and good for their wallet. And I think we get caught up in, sort of elitism about eating healthy, but it really, this family in South Carolina, they lived on food stamps and disability for a family of 5. And they were able to do it in one of the worst food deserts in America. So it's really more about education and awareness than it is about money.
That's great to hear. Awesome. Dr. Mark Hyman, thank you so much for being a guest on Purpose. What I'd love for everyone to do is tag me and Dr. Mark Hyman on Instagram with your favorite insights, your favorite thought or idea or concept or fact that Mark Hyman stated today that stayed with you, and how you're going to experiment with your diet. I'd love for you all to think about what is that deep dive experiment you can do for the next 7 days. What could you remove from your diet or add to your diet based on the insights in the book, based on the guidance in the book that you think is going to make a massive change? Try and experiment for just 7 days for 1 week and see how your life changes. And as I said, go out and grab a copy of the book. We'll put the links in the podcast description so you can go straight to Amazon and grab your copy. Dr. Mark Hyman, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd love to share?
Nothing other than I think, we're in this moment where everybody can focus in on their own health. And by doing that, they will literally help us get through this COVID epidemic and help solve so many of our global problems. Because what we do to ourselves, we do to our communities and our families, and what we do to ourselves, we do to the planet. And so understanding that is a circle, and that we can actually impact that by making those small changes in ourselves, I think is a very powerful message for people to understand.
I love that. Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you again next week. Hey everyone, my name's Jay Shetty and welcome to my YouTube channel. Every week I'm sharing 3 videos that are going to help you feel more fulfilled, feel more happy, and more successful. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you can find out about the videos as soon as they launch. Press the like button and leave a comment, and let's keep making wisdom go viral together. Make sure you subscribe.
Questioners are like, who are these lemmings?
I am so excited for you to be listening to the show right now. Thank you so much for tuning back in. It means the world to me that you come back every single week to listen, learn, and grow. And I love inviting guests onto the show that I really believe are going to expand our minds, give us new insights, and especially people who help us structure the craziness that's going on. Now, today's guest is going to do just that. I've been a long-term fan and follower of her work. Today's guest is Gretchen Rubin, the author of several books, including the New York Times bestsellers, Outer Order, Inner Calm, Better Than Before, The Happiness Project, Happier at Home, and The 4 Tendencies, which we'll be diving into today. She has an enormous readership in print and online, and her books have sold more than 3.5 million copies worldwide in more than 30 languages. She makes frequent TV appearances and is an incredible speaker that I've been following for a long time. She's also a CBS News contributor. Every Monday on CBS This Morning, the final Before We Go segment features her solutions and tips for living a happier, healthier, more productive life. On her weekly podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, which I really recommend you check out, she discusses good habits and happiness with her sister, Elizabeth Kraft. Gretchen started her career in law and now has gone on to become an incredible writer. Today, I'm excited to talk to her about learning about personality types, tendencies, and see how we can immediately and rapidly improve our life, our communication, and our relationships. Gretchen Rubin, everyone. Gretchen, thank you for doing this.
Oh, I'm so happy to be talking to you. I'm a huge fan of your work, and we're interested in so many of the same things. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Thank you for having me.
I know. And I remember when this book came out, I was so excited to read it because I'm so fascinated by personality types, tendencies, how we think, styles, and how we're different. And the fact that I get to sit here with you today and dissect it is a real treat and joy for me. But I wanted to start more on the personal side. I actually wanted to start off by asking you what the last adventure you went on with your 2 daughters, considering it's been such a insular time and obviously restrictive time. What's something you've done with your daughters recently?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think our adventures have been very homebound adventures, but I decided I wanted to learn how to play poker. I wanted to do something with a beginning, middle, and an end. And so we were like, we're going to learn to play poker. My husband knew how to play, but my two daughters and I did not know how to play. So I rallied them, and that was that was an adventure. And I realized like I've been misunderstanding the plots of so many movies and books because I had a complete misconception of how poker worked. And so that's been kind of an adventure that we did under our own roof.
Oh, I love that. Tell me what your perception of poker was and how it differed from reality.
Oh, well, I thought it was like a long, complex game where there was a lot of like, trading cards back and forth. One of my daughters said, she said, the thing that I don't like about poker is it doesn't feel like a game. It feels like the prelude to a different game. And I was like, I don't usually like games. I think that's what I like about it. It's kind of, it just sort of unrolls and you deal with what you have and then you move on. So I thought it was I thought it was more like bridge, whatever my conception of bridge is. I also don't know how to play bridge. But I didn't realize like sort of it's sort of an instant gratification game more than some games.
Yeah, what's that movie I'm thinking of now that you reminded me of? Molly's Game.
Oh, there's so many poker movies. Yeah.
Molly's Game.
And everybody gasps when they see a hand. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means, but now I know. So I'm very excited. Yes, and my family was very patient with me because I was always like, wait, tell me what's a flush again?
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't have the patience to learn how to play that properly, but it was my wife's birthday during quarantine about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago. And we did, I organized my wife's a vegan recipe developer and chef. And so we did a mini food Olympics. So all these games that were based on foods, guessing foods, eating foods, playing with food. And it was a lot of fun. We did it digitally, but it was a lot of fun.
That's a great idea. I love that. That's so whimsical. That's really fun.
Yeah,
it was Olympics.
It was very silly. Yeah, it was very silly. Another thing I wanted to ask you is about this, and I love this line that you say. It really, really has stuck me every time you've said it. You said that I rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a powerful message. And that one line has so much depth to it. Tell us about that journey of becoming a lawyer to then realize that it wasn't your path. Because I think a lot of our listeners are either at that point on their path or getting to that point on their path. Some of them have already made the switch over, and hearing about your journey, I think, will help a lot of people because this isn't what you set out to do in the beginning.
Right. Well, I went to law school for the same reason a lot of people go to law school, because I was like, it's a great education and I'm good at research and writing. It'll keep my options open and I can always change my mind later. My father's a really happy lawyer. He didn't put any pressure on me, but he was definitely an example of someone who loved being a lawyer. So I went for all the wrong reasons, which I call drift. So drift is the decision you make by not deciding or by doing the kind of path of least resistance. You get married because your friends are getting married. You become a doctor because your parents are doctors and you're good at science, or you take a job because somebody offers you that job. So I just kind of drifted into law. And the fact is I had a great experience in law. I was editor-in-chief of the Law Review at Yale, where I was a clerk for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. But while I was clerking for her, I got an idea for a book. And at the time I didn't even know it was a book. I just was obsessed with an idea. And this happens to me all the time in my life. I'll get really interested in something and do a lot of research and writing. But this was, I was just doing so much research and so much writing. And finally I thought, well, this is the way somebody would prepare to write a book. And then I thought, well, maybe I could write a book about this. And then I went to the bookstore and bought a book that was called something like How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal. And I just followed the directions. But as you say, it felt very risky, but I did say to myself, I would rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. And I have to give it a shot. I have to allow myself to either succeed or fail, because if I don't try, I think I'm going to be haunted by this. And so I did.
I love that. I love how simple it is and how practical it is, because I know that so many people, if you're listening or watching right now, that's often what it takes. Like you get a feeling and then you go and do the research and then you follow the steps. And of course, there's so much more hard work and
yes.
sacrifice and everything, all the other ingredients that are really important. But the methodology is usually aligned. It's very similar to wanting to break into a particular industry or whatever it may be, the methodology can be similar, but it's the hard work. Tell us a bit about that side, Gretchen, around the sort of pain or sacrifice or some of the pressure that you felt, because, you know, you were successful, you were doing well for yourself, you've obviously worked, and there's so much sunk cost bias of the drift of like, you've worked so hard to get into this incredible institution and you get so much respect for it and people think you're great at it. And then all of a sudden you're starting out at like basically zero. It's almost like, you know, starting from the bottom again in an industry which you have no reputation in, you have no qualification in. Tell us about what that feels like, and what was it that helped you kind of build your way up from there?
Well, you're exactly right. Like, I didn't have a clip. I hadn't worked on the college newspaper or I hadn't published a short story. Whereas in law, I had all these, feathers in my cap. But if anything, I think, lawyer turned writer sounds so boring. I was like, I even hated to tell people that I was a lawyer because I thought that would make them, run screaming for my proposal. But, I had something that at the time I didn't even think about, but then looking back and talking to other people who are similarly situated, I realized how fortunate I was, which was how the people around me were so tolerant of me taking a risk and so encouraging. And I think sometimes the people around us, out of the deepest love and the desire to protect us, they don't want to see us disappointed. They don't want to see us fail. They don't want to see our feelings get hurt. They don't want to see us frustrated. They want us to be safe. That there is no path of safety. I mean, if anything, if the last 10 years have shown us anything, 15 years, there is no safe profession. And I was really lucky because my parents were like, great, you want to start all over from scratch after having just completed this long thing, which, by the way, we paid for? Fine, great, excellent, go for it. My husband was also switching from law to finance. And so he was also going through a big switch. So we were doing that together. I remember there was a day when I had decided that I was going to try to get an agent and he was going to try to get a job in finance. And we had moved to New York City and the note came from the New York Bar Association. It was time for us to pay our bar fees. And these are not inconsequential fees. Like, you have to pay a lot to be a member of the bar. And I said to my husband, are we going to pay our bar fees? And he said, are you kidding? No way. And I was like, okay, we are doing this. We are committed now. Now I find out you can always get readmitted to the bar if you just do a few things. But at the time, it felt like this massive step. So I was very fortunate that the people around me were really encouraging. And my father said something to me that others, I've repeated it because it was so meaningful to me. And people have said, oh, that sounds discouraging. But actually, it was very encouraging. So I said to my father, okay, I have this idea for a book. I'm going to write it. And he said, well, look, darling, you might not hit it out of the park the first time, but you'll get there. And people said, but that's telling him he didn't think you could succeed. I was like, no, it was him telling me, if you don't fail the first time, that doesn't mean you're a failure. You don't have to succeed right away in order for this to have been the right decision. And that was very comforting to me because I was like, this could take time, and here my father's reminding me, sometimes things take time, but that doesn't mean that they're the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? You've just kind of hit a point for me while I'm listening to you that it's amazing how old were you when you became a qualified lawyer? Like 25, is it? Is it like
when I took the bar, I was probably like 26, 27.
Right. Okay. So you took the bar at 26, 27. And if you think about it, you've been in education or in the educational system since like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah. Yes.
Which means to become a lawyer, and which is an incredible profession, it took 23 to 24 years. And I think we almost forget that it took X amount. So I went to Cass Business School where I studied management science with a focus on behavior science. And I graduated at 21, 22. I was the eldest in my year. And it's like, people forget that means I've spent 18 years to get this qualification, which means getting to something I didn't want took 18 to 24 years. Yeah. But it's funny that we expect all of a sudden that when we do something we're passionate about, that it has to happen on the first time. And we forget that we spent 18 to 24 years trying to get good at something we didn't even love, yet we expect ourselves to be perfect at something the day we try it, and not realizing that it may take sometimes another 10, 20, even 30 years in some cases.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's the way that people deal with the fear of it, is by saying, well, if it's not an immediate success, then I know that I should give up. Mm-hmm. Because to struggle, to flail around, to make mistakes, to learn things the hard way, is tough. And it can be no fun. And so sometimes it feels good to be like, well, I tried it. And so now I learned my lesson, instead of sort of staying in it and kind of allowing yourself to feel that frustration. It's funny because sometimes when people talk about a happy life, they talk about it as if a happy life would be a life when you feel 10 on the 1 to 10 scale, 24/7. And that's not realistic, and it's not even a good life. There's many reasons why we feel sad, or we feel angry, or we feel resentful, or we feel outraged, or we feel, insecure, or we feel scared. And these are all really important emotions. We can learn a lot from them, and they can direct our behavior in really, really positive ways. But it's not always so fun to feel those emotions. Envy is a really powerful, helpful emotion, but it is no fun to feel it. But we can learn a lot from these negative emotions.
Yeah, it's funny how we've created a viewpoint in our minds that we're almost broken if we have those emotions.
Yeah, no, and they're extraordinarily important and useful.
Yeah, and we feel like we have to fix ourselves instead of feel that emotion. And fixing can kind of lead to so much more pain, because every time we fix something, there's another thing, and then there's another thing, and it can be a never-ending cycle. Tell us about how you discovered the 4 tendencies. And when it first was, where you were like, oh, this is a really big idea that's going to help people.
Well, I was sitting right where I'm sitting right now. I remember it. I mean, it hit me like a lightning bolt, because it was something I had been struggling with for months and months, maybe years. And there were all these, I had been writing a book called Better Than Before that was all about habit change, how we make or break our habits. And I'd been noticing patterns in what people said and how they behaved and certain challenges that they faced that I couldn't make sense of, but somehow I intuited that they were somehow connected, but I couldn't understand the pattern. It was just, my brain was melting trying to figure this out. And one of the most significant examples was when a friend said to me, I would be happy. I know I would be happier if I exercised. And when I was in high school, I was on the track team, and I never missed track practice. So why can't I go running on my own now? And I thought, I've heard so many people say something like that. What's going on? And you can think of 100 different reasons maybe that could explain that. But what's really going on? And then there were I would always say to people, how do you feel about New Year's resolutions? Because that's sort of a good habits-related question to get people talking. And certain people would give me exactly the same answer. They say, I would keep a habit or start a resolution whenever it made sense to me. I would not wait for January 1st, because January 1st is an arbitrary date. And they always said arbitrary. And I was like, that's interesting, because the arbitrariness never really bothered me. Then I was at a party, and I was talking to a woman who I now know what tendency she is, but I was telling her I was writing a book about habits. She literally took a step back from me because she was so repelled by the idea of writing a book. She was like, why would you write about such a terrible subject? I was like, I love the idea of habits. To me, they're energizing and freeing. I love the subject of habits. And so one day I was sitting there, and I was just thinking, and these were just running through my mind, and I was trying to understand, how were they connected? And I realized that the idea was expectations. How do people respond to expectations? And when I got to the word expectations, I quickly realized that there are 2 kinds of expectations. Outer expectations, like meeting a deadline or meeting a request from a friend. And then there are inner expectations, like my own desire to become a writer and write a book proposal, my own desire to keep a New Year's resolution. And I realized that when I looked at how people responded to outer and inner expectations, that's what made someone an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. Now, of course, I didn't have those terms right away. It took me a long time to figure out the terms, but I saw the pattern, and it was like a pattern of nature where everything fit, and every example I could think of fit in some way. So it felt like, the periodic table of the elements, where you're like, this just works. Like, it's got that solidity that you get in nature. And I was like, and it was just the most exciting moment of my intellectual life, I have to say.
I love it. I really enjoyed that same feeling of how psychology helps us group and understand people,
yes,
understand ourselves. I think there's such a need for it. And as much as we understand that everyone is genuinely very unique and diverse and different, there are these kind of foundational principles and aspects that kind of keep us in certain groups with others. Tell us a bit about, where did these tendencies come from? Like, are they manufactured through school and family, or are they things that we develop? Where do they actually come from?
Well, I really do believe the 4 tendencies are hardwired. Like, I'm a big believer in the genetic roots of personality generally. And I think that you're an upholder, questioner, obliger, rebel, you bring that into the world with you. Now, obviously, your culture is going to affect it. Like if you're a questioner who's always questioning and you're in North Korea, you maybe learn to keep your mouth shut. But if you're in Silicon Valley, that might be one of your greatest assets, greatest strengths. And I think, with time and experience, we all learn how to manage our tendencies so that we at least we would hope that we would be able to gain from the strength of it and offset the weaknesses and the limitations of it, because we'd sort of learn about ourselves and how to manage ourselves. So, but I do think it is something that you're born with. You're not one at 20 and one at 40. You're not one at work and one at home. These are consistent aspects of your nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that sometimes that I agree with you too. So I believe personality types are hardwired too, and the way we behave. Do you find though that sometimes almost that because one type of personality is demanding to us from work, that often you find people jostling between two in terms of pretending and acting as opposed to being?
I think actually it's really hard to be inconsistent with your tendency. That it's in that that will either you'll steer yourself to a place where your tendency works for you, or it's going to be a major source of conflict. And so maybe I should go through the tendencies. So people
please, let's do that. Yeah.
So there's a quiz if people want to take a quiz that like gives you an answer and spits out a report, because some people get a kick out of that. If you just go to quiz.gretchenrubin.com, it's like 11 questions.
Quiz.gretchenrubin.com. So go there now. I love quizzes and I love it.
Yes. Like 2.8 million people have taken this quiz, and it's free, so you can get your little report. But the fact is, most people know what they are just from the brief description that I'll give right now. These are very blatant. These are not subtle tendencies. You'll know what you are. You'll know the people at your workplace, people in your family, Game of Thrones characters, people in Parks and Recreation, TV shows, movies. They're all around us. Anyway. So it looks at how you respond to outer and inner expectations. So again, outer is like a work deadline, inner is like a New Year's resolution. So upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations. They want to do what others expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. And so their motto is discipline is my freedom. They want to execute and follow through. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. So they want justification, research, rationale, reasons. They resist anything arbitrary, inefficient, unjustified. So if something meets their own inner standard, they will do it no problem. If it fails their inner standard, they will push back. So their motto is, I will comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. And so this is my friend on the track team. When she had a team and a coach expecting her to show up, she had no trouble showing up. But when she was just trying to go on her own, when it was her inner expectation, she struggled. And so the key thing for obligers to realize is if they want to meet an inner expectation, they have to create a system of outer expectation. If you want to read more, join a book group. If you want to exercise more, take a class. Exercise with a friend who's going to be annoyed if you don't show up. Think of your duty to be a role model to somebody else. There's a million ways to create accountability once you realize that's what you need. So their motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then finally, rebels. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, anything they choose to do. But if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. And typically they don't tell themselves what to do. Like they won't sign up for a 10 a.m. spin class on Saturday because they think, I don't know what I want to do on Saturday. And just the idea that it's on my calendar is going to annoy me. So their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. And obliger is the biggest tendency for both men and women. You either are an obliger, you have many obligers in your life, and rebel is the smallest tendency. It's conspicuous, but it's a small tendency.
Okay, good to know. Great foundation setting for all of those areas. So everyone, upholders, questioners, obligers, or rebels. And Gretchen told you the quiz as well. quiz.gretchenrubin.com is where you can take that quiz. So let's dive into all of them a bit more, because I want people to understand how they connect. One of the big ones for me is what I find is how we think everyone. We have two we have the mirror belief where we think everyone thinks like us.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yes.
And then sometimes we run into the other extreme where it's like, well, no one thinks like me and I think differently to everyone.
100%. I completely agree with you. You're either in one or the other. Either everyone is like me or no one is like me. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas with this framework, we start to understand that there are some people that think like me and there are some people that don't. Tell us about how to communicate with each type in a way so that they understand, because I feel like that's where we really see this come alive. I know in my life, where I've seen these tools become the most applicable is when I change the language and the way I speak to certain people, because that's the language that they understand and resonate with. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Yes, and I'll tell you where you can see this play out. Not now because of the pandemic, but in general. If you go to the office kitchen and you look at the signage, you will see all the tendencies like in full blossom, because everybody is coming to it from their own perspective and they don't understand why people disagree. And you're exactly right. You can use the tendencies to really minimize conflict, end procrastination, and also just to show more compassion to yourself and more compassion to other people. So I'll start with obliger because that's the biggest tendency. So obligers need accountability. And a lot of times other tendencies, like I'm an upholder, is my tendency, will say things like, well, I don't want to be your babysitter. Do it whenever it's right for you. Like, I don't want to have to check on you. But obligers do much better work when they do have accountability and when they do have deadlines and deliverables and check-ins. On the other hand, rebels don't like that. They don't like somebody looking over their shoulder. They don't like somebody checking in. They want to do what they want to do in their own way. And if they feel like you're telling them what to do, even if you're praising them for what you're doing, they may start to resist. And so the kind of behavior that might be very effective and even necessary with an obliger could be counterproductive with a rebel. Like I know a rebel who was working as a consultant, and he had a boss who said, this is a really hard problem. I don't know what to do. You've got the chops to deal with this. Go away, figure it out in a month. If you run into roadblocks, let me know. Otherwise, come back to me with a solution. And he's like, that's how I do my best work. But to an obliger, they'd be like, what is happening? Like, I have no, like I need a little more structure. So obliger said to me, when I try to apply for a new job, I say, I work best with a tough boss. Are you a tough, demanding boss? Because that's how I give my best work. Questioners need reasons. And when I talk to healthcare professionals, they know this kind of person very well, where they're like, you're telling me to walk a mile before breakfast every day. Why a mile? Why before breakfast? Why am I walking, not running? What if I take a bike? What if it's in the evening? I don't understand. And it's like they will get on board, but they have to have their questions answered. And if you say, because we've always done it this way, or because I'm the doctor and I say so, or because you said you would, or that's the law, they're like, I don't understand. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And therefore, it's illegitimate. So with questioners, you have to take the time to take them through. And so let's say you're in a work situation. You want to think about, well, how can I give everybody what they need, but not burden everybody with what they need? So like, let's say you were going to implement a new software program. You might say to a group, oh, we're switching to a different software program. I'm going to give you a 20-minute presentation about why we're doing this. And then if you feel like you've heard enough, please feel free to return to your desk. If you would like to stay here and ask me further questions about why we feel like this is the right decision, I'm happy to stay here until you really understand why we think this is the right course for our company. The questioners get their questions answered because, by the way, they often will just silently not go along with what people tell them to do. And that can cause a lot of conflict and a lot of inefficiency. They need to have their questions answered. But, maybe the obliger's like, whatever, that's not my problem. Like, just tell me what you want me to do. And I got other stuff on my to-do list. So when you know the tendencies, you can think cleverly about how to give people what they need and not burden them with a lot of stuff they don't need.
Yeah, those are such great insights, whether it's workplace, whether it's family, it's just, we often wonder why people aren't, motivated.
Yes.
In the same way we are. And
yes.
Like, how do you not get this? Like,
yes. No, that's exactly what happens with the tendencies. Everybody does what would work with their tendencies. So questioners deluge people with research and articles and data and get very tiresome. People are like, too many questions, too much information. Obligers see, everybody's like, you keep saying this is important to you. I don't understand why you're not doing it. Like, you keep saying you want to exercise. Why can't you keep your promise to yourself? Rebels, people are like, why don't you ever do what I want you to do? And then upholders, well, they get rigid. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go to bed at 10 p.m. every night. And I don't care if it's your anniversary party. I got to go home because I'm going running at 8 a.m. You know what I mean? So when you understand that other people have a different perspective, a lot of times it makes you might think, well, it's kind of annoying the way you are, but I'm not going to take it personally. And I'm not going to feel like you're a jerk. I just understand how you're bringing a different perspective to it.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any then in your perspective, what are the recommended occupations or jobs behind certain? Because I feel like often people may reflect and be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't get to be this in my job or role, or I'm not really playing this role. Tell us a bit about, what are are there recommended jobs? Does it mean you can't be a job? How do you almost create a pathway to success knowing your tendency?
Well, there's so many qualities that make somebody good at a particular profession. I think that just about any tendency could do just about any profession well. Like I could imagine being a lawyer, as an upholder, as a questioner, as an obliger, a rebel. I think they would all do that really well. But I also think that you're right that certain professions tend to value certain aspects of nature more highly. And so people tend to do well. Like I would say that question asking professions, maybe scientists, journalists, might be particularly appealing to questioners because it just scratches that itch that they have. It kind of gives them permission. Rebels, interestingly, often are entrepreneurs because they want to do things their own way. They don't want to take advice or direction from anybody else. They also often thrive in sales because with sales, a lot of times it's like, listen, whatever you got to do to make that sale, like, okay, fine. And so they have that freedom. They often do better in positions where every day is different. Like I talked to somebody who was a restaurant manager. So he was like, I'm on the road all the time. Every day is different. I'm always with different people. Nobody really knows where I am. They're not keeping track of me. There was a lot of freedom and choice, and that's really important to a rebel. However, some rebels are very attracted to areas of high regulation, like the clergy, the military, the police, because they like to have something to resist. They need the energy of kind of pushing back. Upholders tend to thrive in places where it's pretty clear what does success look like? What are the rules? They tend not to like things where there's a lot of emphasis on flexibility and like sudden shifts. Like I'm working for a visionary leader who every day has a different plan. It's like, as an upholder, I don't like working that way. Or where it's ambiguous, what the rules are or what success looks like. They tend to want to make a plan and execute it. And questioners do not like to be in a place where things are not justified. Again, like a visionary leader where you're supposed to just like do what that person wants without justification can be very annoying. And obligers really need that outer accountability. Now, what's good is that usually the workplace is kind of an easy place to get accountability because you automatically have deadlines and deliverables and a boss and a team and clients and students and all that. So often obligers will do very well at work and then they don't understand why they can't do equally well at home. They don't understand, well, at work, I have all this accountability, this architecture that's keeping me going. If I would create the same architecture for myself in my private life, I would also succeed with my private aims, but I don't understand that I need to figure out how to create that kind of accountability at home as well as in the office. And so for many obligers, that's like a huge light bulb to understand, why can I keep my promises to other people, but I can't keep my promises to myself? It's like, that's just a thing that obligers experience. Like there's no shame in that. There's no weakness in that. You just fix it and then you're done. It's very simple. And it's not easy, but it's straightforward.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about that actually. How do you improve the natural weaknesses that come up in each? And which weaknesses do you focus on? Because often, let's start there and then I'll follow up. I don't want to ask like 3 questions in one. Let's start there.
No, and I think you're exactly right. This is the question because this is where we have the opportunity to grow, is like to see the weakness. So like my tendency is upholder. And so I would say the weaknesses that you often see with upholders is rigidity. Like we get it in our mind that something's supposed to happen a certain way and it's very hard to get off of that. It's like, I remember I got invited to a wedding and they're like, the bus is leaving for the church at 5. And then the bride's mother was like, no, it's actually leaving at 4:30. And I was like, well, see, that's not possible because I have a card. And it's like, what? That kind of rigidity. And upholders can be kind of judgmental and cold because I'm like, hey, Jay, we both have our reports due on Friday and you want me to proofread your report, but like, I got to proofread my own report. I don't have time to help you. To an upholder, that seems right because I'm meeting my inner expectation. But to other people, it can seem cold. Like you need to like make an effort to extend yourself. And upholders can be judgmental because certain things come more easily to them than they do to other people. Questioners need to learn how to ask questions in a constructive way. They can seem disrespectful or like not team players. If I'm a thin-skinned boss and you're asking me question after question, I start to think, you don't trust my judgment. You're questioning my authority. You're not a team player. I don't want to work for you. So questioners need to learn how to ask questions in a way that don't make other people feel like they're on the stand, or that they're being grilled, or that there's cheekiness. A lot of times questioner children get in trouble because they're like, well, why should I do this dumb book report? It's like, they really are saying, why should I do a dumb book report? So they need to do that. And also questioners can sometimes have analysis paralysis. This is when their desire for perfect information makes it hard to move forward or to make a decision. Because sometimes in this world, we can't wait for perfect information, right? What kind of email platform should I use? I can research that for the next year. At a certain point, they have to say it's more efficient to decide and learn and experiment than to keep researching. For obligers, their weakness is this. It's not even a weakness. It's just a fact. They need outer accountability, and they have to get that outer accountability. And so whether that's taking a class or teaching a class or thinking of your duty to your future self or your duty to be a role model or hiring a coach, joining AA or Weight Watchers, all these things are ways to create outer accountability. Now, obligers have an interesting phenomenon where they can fall into obliger rebellion.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
So they meet an expectations, and then suddenly they snap and they say, this I will not do. It happens when they feel like exploited or taken advantage of or unheard. And sometimes it's small, like, I'm not going to answer your emails for 2 weeks. And sometimes it's huge, like, I'm going to quit this job and walk out today. And it's done to kind of blow up a situation that's become just kind of untenable for the obliger. But it can have very serious reputational consequences because to the other tendencies, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, Jay, I asked you if you wanted to be on this committee and you said, okay, so I don't understand why you're so mad. I don't understand that you're already on 7 committees and nobody else in this company is on more than 2, and that's not fair. And so now you're rebelling because that's how obliger rebellion gets started. And then, so for rebels, they can do whatever they want to do. And so with the rebel, you just can't tell them what to do. And that is hard. It can be frustrating to live or work with somebody who isn't going to do what you tell them to do. So if you're dealing with a rebel, you either want to remind them of how it fits into their identity. You're doing this because you're an athlete. You're an animal lover. You're a musician. You're a poet. You're a writer. This is who you are. Or you give them information consequences choice. Look, if you do your physical therapy, this happens. If you don't do your physical therapy, that happens. Up to you. That's what tends to work best with rebels because they want it. And then sometimes also they will work with a challenge. Like I know a guy who quit smoking because his 18-year-old son, no guy like you could never quit smoking. He's like, watch me. So he quit smoking.
That's great. I love that one. That's awesome. I think when I'm listening to all the descriptions, I definitely feel myself to be in the rebel category.
Interesting.
Yeah, I definitely find myself, and it's interesting that you brought out the both examples of the rebel category of you spoke about the army and the clergy, but then you also talk about entrepreneur. And it's interesting that obviously my life previously is living as a monk and now doing what I do today. I like how you're able to, I think we look at tendencies as so singular. Yes. Like when you hear the word rebel, you wouldn't necessarily think of monk, but I often talk about how monk life was like the ultimate rebellion.
Yes.
Because it was literally saying, well, this version of the world doesn't work. Like this path doesn't work. I'm going to go find a completely extreme and different and a path to find.
Well, and I'll tell you, if you want to do some rebel monk reading, Thomas Merton, who was a very famous Carthusian monk who lived several decades ago, you read his journals because it is like diary of a rebel as a monk. And it is really fascinating. And exactly that thing. Like, I'm going to do the extreme, unexpected thing, the thing people think I can't do. And I'm kind of going all the way. And it's very fascinating how those, another thing, and maybe this will resonate with other parts of your career. I was talking to a guy who's a rebel who worked for, I won't say the name of the company, but let's just say it's like a very big, famous tech company that's well known for being very controlling. And I said, how does a rebel like you work for a place like this? He's like, they're working for me. I'm going to start my own company. They're training me. I'm getting paid to learn how to do all this stuff. And then I'm going to go off and I'm going to start my own company. So to him, they were all working for him. This is what he wanted. And I was like, right, he's doing it in a rebel way, but it's allowing him to get wonderful experience at a really, really big, prestigious company. But he did it in a rebel way. He found the rebel mindset that allowed him to do it.
That's what I love about what you're saying. It's all about the mindset. It's not what you're externally doing.
Yes.
And that the beauty of that is that no matter where you are, if you go all in on the mindset that you naturally are, the tendency that you actually are, then you're guaranteed to find in that space what you want. And so what you just said to me resonates so strongly with me because after living as a monk, I obviously worked at Accenture for a couple of years. And Accenture,
right.
big corporate
That's what made me think of it.
500,000 people. And the most amazing thing is that I was completely a rebel inside the company. And so it was that the mindset that you had, I don't think I had the element of thinking people work for me, but I definitely had that complete understanding of I'm here to learn.
Yes.
I'm growing.
Yes.
I'm actually carving out a career path in the company that is so rare and unique that hasn't existed for 90% of people inside the company before. And I'm going to go all in on that. I don't believe I have to become the generalist, or I don't believe I have to become what they want me to become. I believe I can create my own path.
But see, and your example is perfect for why we need all of the tendencies in a workplace, because it's when you're hiring, of course you gravitate to people of your tendency because they think the way you think, they have the same responses that you have. Everything seems very sensible. But think of how your company would have lost out if they hadn't had your rebel entrepreneurial spirit and the way that you were able to see and be attracted to an opportunity that nobody else saw or wanted to pursue, right? Maybe for whatever reason, they're like, oh, why would I take that risk? Why would I do that? Nobody's done that before. Whereas for you, that's like catnip. For other people, that maybe was a turnoff, but they needed you there because they needed what you could bring. And so I think when you're hiring or you're putting together a team, you need to be very careful. Like I've had people say to me, I only want to hire obligers. Teach me how to screen for obliger. And I'm like, obligers are wonderful. They're the rock of the world, but you don't want only obligers because you need the questioners to be like, why the heck are we doing this? You need the rebels to be like, let's do something completely out of the box. You need the upholders who are like, we're going to execute. We are going to surpass, and we have our eye on that excellence. They all bring so much to it. And I think that your history is a perfect example of why even somebody who's like, I don't like working with a rebel. It's like, well, suck it up because you need that.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. It's because as all these examples you're giving me are making it more and more clear to me why I'm definitely a rebel, and it makes so much sense, and it completely, it's almost like there's a beautiful verse that I quote in my book Think Like a Monk, but it comes from the Manu Smriti, and it says that when you Think
like a monk. Pay. I'll read it out loud if you can play the page. Yeah.
When you protect your purpose protects you. And it's almost like, and when we're using the word dharma or purpose in the monk context, it very much applies to a tendency or a personality type. And what I mean by that is, it's almost like, I feel like the world is constantly trying to get, or at least maybe this is just a rebel experience. So you can tell me if it's just a rebel experience. I feel like I've always felt like everyone is always trying to get me to not be a rebel. Like I feel like I'm always trying to be pulled, and that maybe every personality type feels that. So I'm not saying it's just me, but I've always felt that, and I've had people openly tell me that. I had one executive who said to me, Jay, when you were at Accenture and you were dabbling in like social media and meditation and all that kind of stuff, he was just like, I was like, who's this kid? He doesn't know what he's doing. Like he's going to ruin his career. And he came up to me afterwards, probably earlier on in my media career, and was just like, Jay, this is how I felt about you when I first saw you, but it's really amazing that you proved me wrong and you found your own path. And I was just thinking that I've always come across that resistance where it's always been like, really? Do you really want to do that? Like, is that something that all tendencies experience, or is that something specifically a rebel experience?
I think that everybody feels that in their own way. And so I think questioners are like, who are these lemmings? Everybody is just going along without asking why. Like, who are you people? Like, this makes no sense. Yeah. And the obligers are like, why is everybody telling me what to do? Why am I always the one saying yes? Why am I the one struggling with boundaries? Why can't other people just act like civilized people and do their part? And I'm always the one picking up the slack. And then the rebels are like, why is everybody trying to tell me what to do? Just get out of my way and stop talking to me and I will do it. And so I think that, and then upholders, of course, when you get upholders together, we're just like, why can't anybody else get their stuff done? Like we just are all, And so I do feel like there is that aspect to it where you sort of feel like everybody's experiencing it, but people are experiencing kind of slightly different versions of it. Now you're a rebel, but it's interesting because all the tendencies kind of tip in one direction or another because all the tendencies overlap. So there's rebels who tip to obliger and there's rebels who tip to questioner. So rebels who tip to obliger tend to have more of a spirit of resistance. They're like, you can't tell me what to do. And even if it's something I want to do, if you tell me to do it now, I won't do it because I'm not going to let you think that you're telling me what to do. Then there are rebels who tip to questioner, and they're more like, I'm marching to the beat of my own drummer. I don't care what you want me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. Whether you want me to do it or not, I don't care. I think you're a rebel who tips to questioner, which, by the way, is what Steve Jobs was, which is like, I have my own path. Doesn't really, like, you know what, I've got to do things my own way. But if you weigh in, it's not going to ignite the spirit of resistance to me one way or another. Whereas rebels who tip to obliger really feel like if somebody tells them what to do, it's like they just have to resist. And in a way that they become controlled in the negative. So then they have to manage that, I think, a little bit. I think you're a rebel who tips to question.
It's even more crazy because unless you really, and I don't know if you do know this. So I am a huge Steve Jobs fan.
Oh, well, there you go. Probably because you're like, everything he says makes so much sense.
So literally when you said that, I was just like, that's so funny because no one ever understands how I can be a Steve Jobs fan. And I'm fascinated by so much about him as a human, including his spiritual quest too. He spent a lot of time with monks and spiritual traditions and at the same time had so many other complexities in his life, of course, like we all do. But yeah, I would agree with you on that definition. I've never felt the resistance. I was bringing up the resistance because I think it's such a important thing to protect your tendency, in the sense of, I feel like there's such a need for you to know truly what your tendency is so that you can go all in on that tendency with confidence. Because I think sometimes we doubt our tendencies.
Yeah.
We doubt like whether it's the right thing or we doubt whether it's a good thing. Tell us about that and like looking at it from a good or bad thing. Sometimes we've been trained to believe that certain qualities we actually have as a tendency are actually negative in the world, but actually they're positive for us.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And it really saddens me when people say, well, I don't like my tendency. I want to be this tendency. How do I change?
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like they all have strengths. They all have weaknesses. They all include people who are wildly successful and also people who are big losers. And really, when you look at the people who are the most successful, the happiest, the healthiest, they're really the people who have figured out how to harness the strengths of their tendencies the most effectively, and then also how to offset the limitations or the weaknesses of their tendencies most effectively. Now, where you see this a lot is with obligers, because obligers, they say, well, it's weak that I rely on outer accountability. I don't want to have to do that. Why is it weak? It's a huge percentage of people need outer accountability. Just put it in there and then you can achieve your aim. I don't think that you need to transcend it or transform it. It's just embrace it. And like you say, go with it. And then because you're going with the kind of the natural course of your stream, you're going to just, your little boat is going to float much faster. So obligers will often say that. Now, sometimes rebels say that because they can really get frustrated with themselves if they haven't figured out how to get themselves to do what they want. So if you're an entrepreneur, but you can't get yourself to do the drudge work, well, that's gonna slow you down. Or maybe every time you decide that you're going to exercise every day, then you immediately refuse to do it. I know somebody who was like, I decided I was going to give up carbohydrates, and I went out the next day and bought a big loaf of sourdough bread because no one tells me what to do, including me. So part of it is figuring out, okay, well, how do I do it? And I've heard from so many rebels who are like, everybody told me that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't a real grown-up. I couldn't get things done in the normal way. And now that I know who I am, I can embrace it and take pride in it and see the power of it, enormously powerful tendency. And I can set things up in a way that will allow me to succeed in my own way. And here's the thing about rebels, is a lot of times people make it worse. I mean, if you're the parent of a rebel or the spouse of a rebel or the boss of a rebel, you think, oh, I'll make a list. I'll make a star chart. I'll give helpful hints and reminders. No, every time you do that, you ignite the spirit of resistance. If you would just shut up and stay away, then the rebel would be like, oh, I do need to apply for a job, or I do need to make my bed, or I do want to get an A on the chem exam, and they will do it. But people trying to be helpful often do exactly the wrong thing. And then that creates the spiral of, why can't I do the things that others tell me to do, I want to do, and maybe that I want to do for myself, and yet there's something that keeps tripping me up in my own head. Once you understand the pattern, it's very easy to say, oh, oh, you can't use a to-do list? A lot of rebels don't like to use to-do lists. This is a very common pattern. So what do? Here's these other things that rebels do to kind of get to the place that other people use a to-do list for. Or obligers. It's like people say, I don't understand it. I do really well on Weight Watchers. And then I say to myself, why would I pay to go? I know the whole routine. I don't need to do that. I don't need the time and the money. And then I gain all the weight back. And it's like, oh, because I need the accountability. So maybe there's many ways to create that accountability. Once I realized that that's the key thing for me. So now I have a lot more freedom to get where I want to go because I understand what I need. And there isn't a magic one-size-fits-all solution. Like you say, we're all different and we need to take a different path, but we can all achieve our aim, even if we go different ways there.
Yeah, that's a great answer. This is revelatory. I feel like I'm getting a personal 4 tendencies masterclass.
Oh, good. Yes.
And I'm learning so much more about myself. And that's how I've always felt, that I've become more confident about my tendency as life has gone on, the more I've exercised it. And I feel like often, even if we are a tendency, we may not be exercising enough, consciously enough, where we develop a confidence around it.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think probably it's because you figured out how to succeed. And so you have faith in yourself because you're like, I've figured things out in the past. I'll probably figure this out. I know what's worked for me in the past, so I can figure out like how to sort of replicate that. I think what happens for some people is they've tried and they've gotten discouraged. Or they see other people around them using a certain method or a certain process or a certain curriculum and having great success. And then they think, well, if my brother-in-law can do it, if my boss can do it, what's wrong with me? Instead of saying, well, that's something that works for my brother-in-law, but maybe I'll try it. It might be useful to think about if it worked for him, maybe it'll work for me. I love a data point of 1. But maybe it's not. And I think knowing your tendency you don't have to just throw spaghetti against the wall. You can you can be targeted and say, this sounds like the kind of thing that would work for a questioner. Because there's a lot of justification. There's a lot of data here. This is really like answering all my questions. I feel like I can really get on board with this program. Like I don't eat carbs. I'm like one of these really crazy low carb eaters. My father's a questioner and he did so much research after I told him about it. And then he went 100% into the low carb world because he's like, I'm completely convinced. I'm on board. Whereas with me, I like read one book. I'm like, I'm doing this. That's all I need. I just want one authority, Gary Taubes. That's all. I read Why We Get Fat. And I'm like, I'm changing everything overnight.
I love that. Yeah. And that's also what helps us have more compassion for other people.
Exactly.
Right. Like, I think that's what's missing in the world right now in so many areas where we kind of just don't realize that for some people it's going to take a year, and for some people it's going to take a day, and for some people it's going to take a book, and for some people it's going to take an overseas trip or whatever it is. Like it helps you build so much compassion because you go, oh, I get it. Why I learn this quickly and you learn it slowly, and you learn that quickly and I learn it slowly.
Well, I had this exact experience with my husband. So my husband's a questioner and I was filling out some boring form that we had to fill out as a couple. And that's why it's nice to be married to a polder, because I'm the one that's just going to go ahead and get it done to get it off the list. And he had changed jobs recently, so I didn't know his office address. So I called him and I said, hey, Jamie, what's your office address? And what did he say? Why do you want to know? And I would have said years ago, before I came up with this, I would have been like, why can't you just answer a simple question? Why does everything have to be long drawn out? I'm the one doing all this work. You're just slowing things down. Are you jerking my chain? Why are you so annoying? And now I'm like, he doesn't do anything unless he understands why. Yeah. That it's like he's like that with me. He's like that with everybody. I might be annoyed by it, but I don't have to be hurt by it. It's no reflection on our relationship. And I know, what should I have said? I should have said, hey, Jamie, I'm filling out that boring bureaucratic form. What's your work address? And he would have told me no problem. He just needs to know why. And so again, it's like I don't take it personally anymore because I know that's just where he's coming from. And a lot of times I benefit from it. It's great for me in many ways to have a questioner in my life. I'll say to him, I feel like I have to do this. Do I have to do this? And he'd be like, why would you do that? I'm like, you're right. I'm not going to do that. It's very freeing for me to consult with him.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. You said, I'm allowed to be annoyed, but I'm never hurt by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And eventually what you explained, you realize you're like, actually, I don't even need to be annoyed by it. It can actually help me.
Yes.
I think it's such a refreshing perspective because half the things we argue about, whether it's with our spouses or with partners or girlfriends or boyfriends or people in the workplace, is usually just because we're speaking in different tendencies.
Yeah.
It's usually not that much deeper than that. And the problem is that we take it to be hurt and emotional disconnect and emotional distance. Tell me about, is there a recommended partner or friendship type? Like, should you marry someone, or should you, obviously you've taught us how we can adapt, but is there a recommended friend type or business partner or marriage?
Well, here's the most striking pattern. If there is and you can tell me if this is true for you, when you have a rebel who's paired up either in romance or in a work life, like a founding team, if one person is a rebel, almost always the other person is an obliger. Now, there are exceptions, and it's funny, the exceptions themselves fall into very distinct categories. But almost always, if there's a rebel, they're paired up with an obliger, because questioners and upholders tend not to work well with rebels, but obligers do work well with rebels. And actually, obligers they're the kind of type O appropriately. They are the ones that team up the most easily with all other three tendencies, which is good. They're the biggest tendency, and they do the best with the other three. Upholders tend to do very well with questioners. I'm an upholder married to a questioner, and that tends to be very consistent. Again, they can work with obligers, they can work with rebels. But rebels and upholders are kind of the two opposite. They're the most extreme personality types. They tend not to work well together because just what they value is so different. So like maybe as a rebel, you experience this. There's a lot of value on spontaneity. There's a lot of value. Let's keep things open. Let's let things play out. Let's see how we feel. As an upholder, I put no value on spontaneity. I want to have a plan for everything. I just like to live that way. Well, that's hard for us to work together because I'm trying to plan out 6 months and you're trying to keep our days open. Or you might like have a vision and be like, let's rethink the priorities of this company. And I'm like, but I've have such an extensive execution plan. It's distressing to me to like throw it all away. Whereas you find that like very liberating and freeing and creative. I find it creative to dig deep and execute over the long term. So it's not that they can't, but it's often that they like to work in such different ways that they end up just not enjoying working with each other as much. In a big team, you could have it, but if it's just like a pair, it can be hard.
Yeah, that's really good to know, I think, for people, because obviously me and Gretchen are not sitting here saying don't marry someone who's not
right. No, and there are many exceptions. Obviously,
or break up with someone if
yes.
they're not the right. We're not saying that at all, but you've got to know what you're working with. Whether you're dating or already married, you've got to know what to adapt to. The great example that you gave, Gretchen, about you and your husband having a conversation, it can be so beneficial actually. And if we don't just look at that difference as emotional, and I think sometimes we take it too personally, too emotionally, we don't realize that it's a tendency.
Well, like I collaborate with a lot of rebels, and believe me, whenever I write an email, it's like, if this works for you, if this sounds fun, whenever it's convenient for you, something that you could do if you thought it would help you is this. Because I want them to be like, this sounds fun. This works for me. This gets me what I want. I will do it in my own way. I don't want to accidentally push their buttons by like, could you please do this by Friday? Because they're going to be like, yeah, I don't want to do it by Friday. Because like, I don't want to get in their way or my way. So everything is the same. I just am careful to frame it in the way that will be sweet to their ears. It's totally easy to do once I know that that's the way to communicate more effectively. And that's true of everybody in our lives.
How does it work in terms of conflict in relationships? So if there's a conflict in a relationship, do some of these tendencies, do we tend to close off or open up? Is it different? But how does it work for the different tendencies?
Well, one point of conflict that comes up sometimes with obligers is the other tendencies will say, why do you keep talking about this and you don't follow through? And they get very kind of exasperated. You keep saying you want to exercise. You say you want to switch careers. You say you want to write a novel in your free time. Do it, don't do it. I don't care. But I don't like seeing you just keep talking about it. And so they get frustrated and they don't understand. Now, often sweethearts don't make good accountability partners. And it's also very burdensome to be an accountability partner. That's why many people hire coaches and, people like you hire somebody to do it. So they're trained at it and they're really good at it. But if you understand that's what's necessary, a lot of times, again, the emotion drains out of it, and you're like, well, let's get you what you need, instead of like, why am I'm getting frustrated with you, or feeling like, you're somehow like not keeping your promises to yourself. With questioners, the conflict often comes from them feeling like people are asking them to do things that are arbitrary. So here's an example. Like, somebody's like, if I said to my husband, like, we don't have a suburban house, but like a friend of mine was just saying, she said to her husband, let's clean out the basement this weekend. And he's like, we never use the basement. Why would we clean it out? It's like, that just doesn't make any sense to him. But if she said something like, and then she gets irritated because he'll never do it, blah, 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 blah. But if she said, oh, we're having company come in 2 weeks and their kids need someplace to sleep. If we clean out the basement, they can have a whole room to themselves. Let's do it by the time they come. It's like, I see why I'm being asked to do this, and I see the timeline, and this makes sense to me. You're going to have a lot less conflict if you present the reasons. And then with the rebel, again, it's like, a lot of times it's because I'm trying to tell you what to do. And I mean, we on the Happier podcast, we had 2 people call in with questions like in the same 2 weeks, where they had sweethearts who needed to look for jobs. One guy had been laid off, and one guy was moving to a new city to be with his girlfriend. And one was a questioner, one was a lecturer. They're like, what do I do to help my boyfriend look for a job? It's like, nothing. These guys know they need a job. Like, if you make a list and remind them, make a list of phone numbers, circle things in the newspaper, you're going to ignite that spirit of resistance. Let them do it in their own way. They got this. Just let them do it in their own way. Now, it might not be your way. This is like when someone decides to clean out the basement at 2:00 in the morning because that's what they feel like. Don't get in their way. Let them do it when they want to. Spontaneity, when they feel like it, their choice, their freedom. But once you recognize that and what a high value it is, you can let the rebel do it.
I love that. That's amazing. I absolutely love that. Yeah, no, I really believe everyone needs to, at some point, dive deep into this work in their life, because it can solve so many issues in so many areas of our life simply by deeply understanding people and wanting to communicate with them in a way that actually, and that is compassion, that is empathy, that is a real connection. It's not a technique. It's not a manipulation strategy. It's not a tool. It's not to take advantage of someone. It's to deeply speak to someone's wiring in their heart without making it so difficult to understand someone.
Well, and I hear this a lot from doctors and nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, people like that, where they do want to connect with their patients. They want so much to be helpful, to be of service, to help people get out of pain and get towards good health. And they're very frustrated because they know that in many cases they are not successfully communicating and reaching those patients. And so they're very excited to have a tool where, as you say, it's not about manipulation. It's not about tricking somebody. It's about speaking in a way that is going to strike a chord with them, in a way that's going to allow their actions to follow their thoughts. You write about this all the time. How do we put our values and our ideas into the world? That's not always as easy as it sounds. And so this is a way to kind of make that match more effective. This
understanding has made the biggest impact on where I am today and how I feel. Because in the monk teaching, it's called Dharma, and the psychophysical nature is called Dharma, and that's what I studied. And when you look at the 4 tendencies, it's so brilliantly explained, and I love the detail you go into of really helping someone understand which one they are. So anyone who's listening and watching, I highly recommend the 4 tendencies. It's a great way of getting some real self-awareness. Take the quiz and really dive into the people that you spend the most time with in your life, at work, at home. At least start by knowing theirs. You don't need to walk around with a 4 tendency radar. Like Gretchen would know anyone she meets in 2 seconds and will know what they are. And, you may not be at that stage and you may not want to, but it's really important that you understand your family and your work environment. Like if you know those 2 environments and you know their tendencies, it's going to make a world of difference. I know that we've been using these tools in our recruitment as well. So I use a lot of these tools in recruiting people onto my teams because I want to build, like Gretchen said, a complete holistic team where we have different people allowing us. And when I'm speaking at companies, and if we ever use tools like this, we're always looking at, like, you want a company that ideally has a equal split rather than be too far off in one or another. So Gretchen, this is amazing. I want to ask you your final 5. These are usually questions that are answered in 1 word or 1 sentence. I'm asking you some really questions I'm curious about, so you may go slightly over. But the final 5 are meant to be concise, but I give you permission in advance to not.
Oh, good.
I'm asking stuff I'm really curious about. Okay, so these are all picked up from things you've said. I love this piece of advice. I'm intrigued by it. You've said it's better to have frequent, boring, mundane communication than to save it up. Before I understood what you meant by that, it took me a while to wrap my head around it, but I love your explanations. Can you explain why?
When we talk to people often, we have a lot to say, and we don't want to talk to them very often. We're sort of like, I'm fine. How are you? I am also fine. And so like these little mundane details of our lives help us stay connected and kind of keep our relationships more alive.
Love it. Great answer. So anyone who's wondering whether you should talk to someone regularly or not as regularly will be better. Second question. I absolutely love the saying that you said, the days are long, but the years are short. Expand on that for us.
I think of everything that I've ever written in my whole life. Like I did a little video about a story called The Days Are Long, but the Years Are Short. And it just really resonates with people. You know, sometimes getting from morning to night, it feels like an eternity, but then you're like, where did May go? Where did 2019 go? Especially I think for the parents of young children, the days can seem very long, but the years seem very short.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a beautiful reminder for us as well. And it has so much meaning to it. I love it. Okay, question number 3. What are some of the common small challenges you've heard people made in their lives that significantly boosted their overall happiness? And I love the 1-minute rule that you speak about.
Oh yeah. The 1-minute rule is that anything you can do in less than a minute, you do without delay. So if you can hang up a coat or put a dish in the dishwasher or file something, you do, and that gets rid of kind of the scum on the clutter of life. Another quick lift, if you need it, is to jump up and down. Do jumping jacks, run down the stairs, jump over a puddle. It's quick, it's lively, it's kind of childlike. And one of the easiest, quickest ways to intervene in your mood is to listen to one of your favorite upbeat songs. It's one of the quickest ways to give yourself a boost.
I love it. Okay, awesome. Question number 4. I know you love children's books.
Yes.
I've heard that reading them before bed is a great way to unwind. I've actually been reading, my friends have a 6-month-old, and I go over once a week or something, and I read a bedtime story, one of his books. And we sit there and we lie on our backs on the floor, and I read it, and he loves, like, he's 6 months old. So he loves, like, grabbing the book, and it's really beautiful. I mean, children's books are just written so beautifully, and I don't have a child yet, but I've definitely connected with them. So I resonate with you. Tell us some of the best children's books you recommend.
I love The Lonely Doll. I love The 7 Silly Eaters. Goodnight Moon, of course. Crazy, Strange, Where the Wild Things Are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Rabbit and the Gift.
A lot already.
Yeah. Those are picture books. And then for chapter books, if you haven't read children's literature lately, you are missing out because there are so many great books. You should read His Dark Materials, the trilogy, and subsequent books by Philip Pullman, Kristen Kashore's Graceling trilogy. The Hunger Games is amazing by Suzanne Collins. I can't even, like, my mind is staggering because I love children's literature so much. There's so much great stuff right now. Oh, Jason Reynolds is a fantastic writer who's writing today, won every kind of award. Jacqueline Woodson. Anyway, there's so many great writers.
Amazing. I love it. And 5th and final question. I've heard you say people know they don't want what they have, but they don't know what they want. Have you heard it? Do you remember saying this?
Yes. And I mean, it's hard. I mean, I think you raised this at the beginning of the conversation, which is sometimes we don't know ourselves. You know, we think we know ourselves, but we know what other people expect from us, or we know what we wish we expected from ourselves. And so sometimes you know what you don't want, but you don't know what you do want. Like, and back to my career transition, I feel really lucky because I wanted to write a book so desperately. It was like the Death Star pulling me in its tractor beam. Like, it was very clear to me what I wanted. Whereas a lot of times when people are making a career shift, they know what they don't want, but they haven't figured out what they do want. And that's when you have to, like, read What Color's Your Parachute and, like, do all that soul searching. And that's painful and hard because people know what they don't want, but they don't know what they do want.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gretchen. And that's your final 5. Thank you for being on Purpose. Everyone who's been listening, go and grab a copy of the 4 Tendencies if you enjoyed this conversation. Keep listening to On Purpose, and make sure you tag me and Gretchen on Instagram with your biggest insights. Anything that she shared or said that really resonated or connected with you, please do tag us. I love seeing what are the messages that you're really getting from these podcasts? And I'm sure she'll be happy to see them as well. And keep coming back to On Purpose. Thank you so much. Gretchen, thank you for coming. This was
Thank
great.
you. It's so fun to talk to you. I so appreciate it.
Hey everyone, my name's Jay Shetty and welcome to my YouTube channel. Every week I'm sharing 3 videos that are going to help you feel more fulfilled, feel more happy, and more successful. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you can find out about the videos as soon as they launch. Press the like button and leave a comment, and let's keep making wisdom go viral together. Make sure you subscribe.